Quite good, actually, all things considered. And I think after today, it actually clears up and we get sunshine for about 3-4 days in a row, so can't beat that. It's always fun for me to watch the dwindling crowds in the morning. People have their intent is there, their heart's there, but their flesh is weak, as they say. Hey, I was at breakfast. That'll tell you. I almost was going to skip it, but I got there. It's part of why we're about 5 minutes late. Okay. Just a reminder of upcoming things for today. Okay, as we get everybody in the room, I'll probably remind us again between the readings and the discussion. Okay. Where did I put? I thought I brought it up here. Did not. Okay, 1 second. That's right here. Okay. So today we have the shofar clinic in the afternoon. All right. Everything you ever or never wanted to know about a shofar, but we're afraid to ask. Okay. And we're going to have fun having opportunities to blow them a little bit and everything else. I'll try to squeeze in all of that time in there. And then, of course, the marketplace will be open if people want to take advantage of that. This will be the last official time the marketplace is open. I don't know about other groups that that's all they do is sell stuff. We're just trying to have it scheduled in there because I know people are constantly asking, when's the marketplace going to be open? So we actually put it in the schedule this time. And so we'll be open today. Actually, even during the clinic, if you guys can do your marketplace stuff, reasonably quietly. Or if you think you can hear your discussion at the marketplace over my blasting of the horn, either one. Okay, either way it could work out. All right, so that is the schedule for today. And then after supper tonight, there are some counseling sessions and there's fellowship time. Now, when you see fellowship time on there, that's actually a commanded instruction from the leadership. You must fellowship. Look, this is why you're here, You're here to do two things. To be here with the Heavenly Father, okay, to worship and study and learn through the Son and the Ruach, but you're here to also figure out this whole community thing and relational things. And a lot of us are not really good at that necessarily, and it gives us a good time to practice it. And so I want to encourage you to not spend all your time with the same 4 people you met on day 1, okay? But get to meet different people. I didn't say don't spend any time with the people you met on day 1. I said don't spend all your time just with the same few people that you know or that you just met. But, kind of get to know, not everybody. I mean, there's 400 people here. But get to know a good number of people, build a few relationships, and that would be really great. All right. Let me get this off. Okay. All right, so we're going to go through Deuteronomy chapters 8 through 14, I think, today. Let me just see. Yep. 8 through 14. Of course, 2 of my favorite passages are going to be covered by somebody today. So we got a couple of them, Deuteronomy 8 and Deuteronomy 10. So that'll be exciting to go through those. So everybody should hopefully have out a way to take notes so that you can maybe mark down some things you may want to talk about or ask questions about when we get to that part of the study today. Okay? So again, a reminder, so what we're going to do is we're going to have readers come up. I have, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 readings. Okay? So we got 8 people up there now. All right, so we'll need about 4 more. Okay, so we have 12 readings today. So we're going to go ahead and read these chapters 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and 14. And then we're going to, again, remind everybody about those quick announcements and then go through the discussion part of the readings. Did you guys enjoy day 1 of the readings? That was a quick sort of trick question, because how could you not applaud to reading the Word? That would be very embarrassing, so I kind of put you on the spot. You had no choice. Okay. Whether you liked it or not, well, what are you going to say, not clap or boo to reading the Word? I mean, you're kind of stuck with that one. No, but I mean, really, hopefully you understand, for those who've never done that before, how wonderful it can be to sit, hear the Word read, get the opportunity to read it, and then talk about it. And I think that's really Something we could be doing all day long. Okay, we're going to get started here. Let me put my notes off to the side. All right, Ollie, come on up. All right, he who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Ali, who's come upon our Yahweh in the Torah. May the set apart one bless him and his family and send blessing and prosperity on all the works of his hands. Amen. Okay, Ali's going to start us off and read chapter 8, verses 1 through 20, which is the whole chapter.
Guard to do every command which I command you today, that you might live and shall increase and go in, and shall possess the land of which Yahweh swore to your fathers. And you shall remember that Yahweh your Elohim led you all the way these 40 years in the wilderness to humble you, prove you, to know what is in your heart, whether you guard his commands or not. And he humbled you, and let you suffer hunger, and fed you with manna, which you did not know, nor did your fathers know, to make you know that man does not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of Yahweh. Your garments did not wear out on you, nor did your foot swell these 40 years. Thus you shall know in your heart that as a man disciplines his son, so Yahweh Elohim disciplines you. Therefore you shall guard the commands of Yahweh your Elohim, to walk in his ways and to fear him. For Yahweh your Elohim is bringing you into a good land, a land of streams of water, of fountains and springs that flow out of valleys and hills, a land of wheat and barley, of vines and fig trees and pomegranates, a land of olive oil and honey, a land in which you eat bread without scarcity, in which you do not lack at all, a land whose stones are iron and out of whose hills you dig copper. And you shall eat and be satisfied, and shall bless Yahweh your Elohim for the good land which he has given you. Be on guard, lest you forget Yahweh your Elohim by not guarding his commands and his right rulings and his laws which I command you today. Lest you eat and shall be satisfied, and build lovely houses and shall dwell in them, and your herds and your flocks increase, and your silver and your gold are increased, and all that you have is increased, that your heart then becomes lifted up, and you forget Yahweh your Elohim, who brought you out of the land of Mitzrayim, from the house of bondage, who led you through that great and awesome wilderness, fiery serpents and scorpions in thirst, where there was no water, who brought water for you out of the flinty rock, who fed you in the wilderness with manna, which your fathers did not know, in order to humble you and to try you, to do you good in the end. You then shall say in your heart, my power and the strength of my hand have made for me this wealth. But you shall remember Yahweh your Elohim, for it is he who gives you power to get wealth, in order to establish his covenant which he swore to your fathers, as it is today. And it shall be, if you by any means forget Yahweh your Elohim, and follow other mighty ones, and serve them, and bow yourself to them, I have warned you this day that you shall certainly perish. Like the nations which Yahweh is destroying before you, so you are to perish, because you did not obey the voice of Yahweh your Elohim.
Amen. Okay, thank you, Ali. Okay. Now, just let me interrupt for a second. Okay, so we just read that in Deuteronomy where it says, have you eaten and are you satisfied? Yes. So for all of you that went to breakfast, let's pray. We've eaten and we are satisfied, and we're going to pause to recognize Yahweh, our Creator, as the supplier of all of our wealth and the abundance that we have, so that we are able to be satisfied with all that we need. And so we thank him as the provider. We thank you for giving us all the things that we need, that we never lack any good thing, and we want to do that in the name and the authority of Yeshua, our Messiah. Amen. Amen. Okay, next reader. Okay, Reno. Apparently you came from a different climate zone than the rest of us. He's wearing his jacket. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Reno, who has come up to honor Yahweh in the Torah. May the set-apart one bless him and his family and send blessing and prosperity on all the works of his hands. Amen. Okay, Reno's going to take us now to chapter 9 and read verses 1 through 14.
Hear, O Yisrael, you are passing over the Yarden today to go into the dispossessed nations greater and stronger than yourself, cities great and walled up to the heavens, a people great and tall, the descendants of the Anakim, whom you know and of whom you have heard it said, who does stand before the descendants of Anak? And you shall know today that Yah, your Elohim, is he who passes over before you as a consuming fire. He does destroy them and subdue them before you. So you shall dispossess them and destroy them quickly, as Yah has said to you. Do not think in your heart, after Yah your Elohim has driven them out before you, saying, because of my righteousness, Yah has brought me in to possess this land, but it is because of the wrong of these nations that Yah is driving them out from before you. It is not because of your righteousness or the uprightness of your heart that you go in to possess their land, but because of the wrong of these nations that Yah, your Elohim, drives them out from before you, in order to establish the word which Yah swore to your fathers, to Abraham, to Yitzhak, and to Yaakov. And you shall know that Yah, your Elohim, is not giving you this good land to possess because of your righteousness, for you are a stiff-necked people. Remember, do not forget how you provoked to wrath Yah your Elohim in the wilderness, from the day that you came out of the land of Mitzrayim until you came to this place. You have been rebellious against Yah. Even in Horeb you made Yah wroth, so that Yah was enraged with you to destroy you. When I went up into the mountain to receive the tablets of stone, the tablets of the covenant which Yah made with you, then I stayed on the mountain 40 days and 40 nights. I did not eat bread, nor did I drink water. Then Yah gave me the 2 tablets of stone written with the finger of Elohim, and on them were all the words which Yah had spoken to you on the mountain from the midst of the fire in the day of the assembly. And it came to be at the end of 40 days and 40 nights that Yah gave me the 2 tablets of stone, the tablets of the covenant. Then Yah said to me, arise, go down quickly from here, for your people, whom you brought out of Mitzrayim, have acted corruptly. They have quickly turned aside from the way which I commanded them. They have made themselves a molded image. And Yah spoke to me, saying, I have seen this people, and look, they are a stiff-necked people. Leave me alone so that I destroy them, and blot out their name from under the heavens, and make of you a nation stronger and greater than they.
Amen. Okay, thank you, Reno. All right, Sam. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Sam, who's come up to honor Yahweh in the Torah. May the set-apart one bless him and his family and send blessing and prosperity on all the works of his hands. Amen. Okay, Sam's going to take us from verse 15 to the end of chapter 9.
So I turned and came down from the mountain, and the mountain burned with fire, and 2 tablets of the covenant were in my hands. And I looked and saw that you had sinned against Yah your Elohim, and had made for yourselves a molded calf. You had quickly turned aside from the way which Yah had commanded you. And I took the 2 tablets and threw them out of my 2 hands and broke them before your eyes. And I fell down before Yah as at the first. 40 days and 40 nights I did not eat bread, and I did not drink water, because of all your sins which you committed in doing evil in the eyes of Yah, to provoke him. For I was afraid of the displeasure and rage with which Yah was wroth with you, to destroy you. But Yah listened to me that time once more. And Yah was very enraged with Aharon to destroy him. So I prayed for Aharon at that time also. And I took your sin, the calf which you had made, and burned it with fire, and crushed it, and ground it very small, until it was as fine as dust. And I threw its dust into the stream that came down from the mountain. And at Tavera, and at Massah, and at Kivroth Hata'awa, you made Yah wroth. And when Yah sent you from Kadesh Barnea, saying, Go up and possess the land which I have given you, then you rebelled against the mouth of Yah, your Elohim, and you neither trusted him nor listened to his voice. You have been rebellious against Yah from the day that I knew you. So I fell down before Yah the 40 days and 40 nights, for I fell down because Yah had said he would destroy you. And I prayed to Yah and said, O Master Yah, do not destroy your people and your inheritance, whom you have ransomed in your greatness, whom you have brought out of Mitzrayim with a strong hand. Remember your servants, Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Do not look on the stubbornness of this people, or on their wrong, or on their sin, lest the land from which you brought us should say, because Yah was not able to bring them to the land which he promised them, and because he hated them, he has brought them out to kill them in the wilderness. And they are your people and your inheritance, whom you brought out by your great power and by your outstretched arm.
Amen. Amen. Okay, thank you. All right. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Pete, who's come up to honor Yahweh in the Torah. May the set apart one bless him and his family, and send blessing and prosperity in all the works of his hands. Amen. Okay, Pete's going to go into chapter 10 now and read the first 11 verses.
At that time, Yahweh said to me, Hew for yourself 2 tablets of stone like the first, and come up to me on the mountain, and you shall make yourself an ark of wood. Then I write on the tablets the words that were in the first tablets, which you broke, and you shall put them in the ark. So I made an ark of acacia wood, hewed 2 tablets of stone like the first, and went up the mountain with the 2 tablets in my hand. And he wrote on the tablets according to the first writing, the 10 words, which Yahweh had spoken to you in the mountain from the midst of the fire in the day of the assembly. Then Yahweh gave them to me. And I turned and came down from the mountain and put the tablets in the ark which I had made. And they are there, as Yahweh commanded me. Now the children of Israel set out from the wells of Bnei Yaakan to Moserah. Aaron died there, and he was buried there. And Eleazar his son became priest in his place. From there they set out to Gogodah, and from Gogodah to Yotbatah, a land of rivers of water. At that time Yahweh separated the tribe of Levi to bear the ark of the covenant to Yahweh, to stand before Yahweh, to serve him, and to bless in his name to this day. Therefore Levi has no portion nor inheritance with his brothers. Yahweh is his inheritance, as Yahweh your Elohim promised him. And I stayed in the mountain for 40 days and 40 nights, and Yahweh heard me at that time also, and Yahweh chose not to destroy you. And Yahweh said to me, Arise, go before the people to set out, and let them go in and possess the land which I swore to their fathers to give them.
Amen. Amen. Okay. Kendall. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Kendall, who's come up to honor Yahweh in the Torah. May the set apart one bless him and his family, and send blessing and prosperity in all the works of his hands. Amen. Okay, you're going to take us from verse 12 to the end of the chapter.
And now, Yisrael, what is Yahweh your Elohim asking of you, but to fear Yahweh your Elohim, to walk in all his ways, and to love him, and to serve Yahweh your Elohim with all your heart, with all your being, to guard the commands of Yahweh and his laws, which I command you today for your good. See, the heavens and the heaven of heavens belong to Yahweh your Elohim, also the earth with all that is in it. Yahweh delighted only in your fathers to love them, and he chose their seed after them, you above all peoples, as it is today. And you shall circumcise the foreskin of your heart, and harden your neck no more. For Yahweh your Elohim is Elohim of mighty ones, and master of masters, the great El, mighty and awesome, who shows no partiality nor takes a bribe. He executes right ruling for the fatherless and the widow, and loves the stranger, giving him food and a garment. And you shall love the stranger, for you were strangers in the land of Mitzrayim. Fear Yahweh your Elohim, serve him and cling to him, and swear by his name. He is your praise, and he is your Elohim, who has done for you these great and awesome deeds which your eyes have seen. Your fathers went down to Mitzrayim with 70 beings, and now Yahweh your Elohim has made you as numerous as the stars of the heavens.
Amen. Amen. Robert. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Robert who's come up down to Yahweh in the Torah. May the set apart one bless him and his family, and send blessing and prosperity in all the works of his hands. Amen. Okay, chapter 11, verses 1 through 15.
And you shall love Yahweh your Elohim and guard his charge, even his laws and his right rulings and his commands always. And you shall know today, for it is not your children who have not known and who have not seen the discipline of Yahweh your Elohim, his greatness, his strong hand, and his outstretched arm, and his signs and his works, which he had done in the midst of Mitzrayim, to Pharaoh, sovereign of Mitzrayim, and to all his land, and that which he had done to the army of Mitzrayim, to their horses and their chariots, when he made the waters of the sea of reeds overflow them as they pursued you, and how Yahweh has destroyed them to this day, and what he had done for you in the wilderness till you came to this place, and what he had done to Dathan and Abiram, the sons of Eliab, son of Reuben, when the earth opened its mouth and swallowed them up, and their households, and their tents, and all their living creatures that were in their possession in the midst of all Israel. For yours are the eyes that saw all the great work of Yahweh which he did. And you shall guard every command which I command you today, so that you are strong, and shall go in and shall possess the land which you are passing over to possess, and to prolong your days in the land which Yahweh swore to give your fathers, to them and their descendants, a land flowing with milk and honey. For the land which you are going in to possess is not like the land of Mitzrayim from which you have come, where you sowed your seed and watered it by foot as a vegetable garden. But the land which you are passing over to possess is a land of hills and valleys, which drinks water from the rain of the heavens, a land which Yahweh your Elohim looks after. The eyes of Yahweh your Elohim are always on it, from the beginning of the year to the latter end of the year. And it shall be that if you diligently obey my commands, which I command you today, to love Yahweh your Elohim and to serve him with all your heart and with all your being, then I shall give you the rain for your land in its season, the early rain and the latter rain, and you shall gather in your grain and your new wine and your oil. And I shall give grass in your fields for the livestock, and you shall eat and be satisfied.
Amen. Amen. Okay, Santi. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Santi, who has come up to honor Yahweh in the Torah. May the set apart one bless her and her family and send blessing and prosperity in all the works of her hands. Amen. Okay, Santi is going to take us from verse 16 to the end of the chapter.
I read in Chinese. So you understand Chinese from now on. Guard yourself. Okay. Guard yourself, lest your heart be deceived, and you turn aside and serve other mighty ones and bow down to them. Then the displeasure of Yehovah shall burn against you, and he shall shut up the heavens, and there be no rain, and the land not give its increase. And you shall perish quickly from the good land which Yehovah is giving you. And you shall lay up these words of mine in your heart and in your being, and shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. And you shall teach them to your children, speaking of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise up. And shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates, so that your days and the days of your children are increased on the soil of which Yehovah swore to your fathers to give them, as the days of the heavens on the earth. And if you diligently guard all these commands which I command you, to do it, to love Yehovah, your Elohim, to walk in all his ways, and to cling to him, then Yehovah shall drive out all these nations before you, and you shall dispose greater and stronger nations than you. Every place on which the sole of your feet treads is yours, from the wilderness and Lebanon, from the river Euphrates, even to the western sea is your border. No man shall stand against you. Yehovah, your Elohim, shall put the dread of you and the fear of you upon all the land where you tread. As he has spoken to you, see, I am setting before you today a blessing and a curse. The blessing when you obey the commands of Yehovah, your Elohim, which I command you today, and the curse if you do not obey the commands of Yehovah, your Elohim, but turn aside from the way which I command you today, to go after other mighty ones which you have not known. And it shall be, when Yehovah your Elohim has brought you in the land which you go to possess, that you shall put the blessings on Mount Zerim and the curse on Mount Ebal, and they not beyond the Yadon toward the setting sun, in the land of Canaanites, who dwell in the desert plain opposite Gilgal, beside the terebinth trees of Morin. For you are passing over the Jordan to go in to possess the land of which Yehovah your Elohim is giving you, and you shall possess it and dwell in it. And shall guard to do all the laws and the right rulings which I am setting before you today. Now you know Chinese.
Shishi.
Even Rabbi know how to speak.
I said shishi. I said thank you. All right. 1 to 16. Okay, next. George. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless George who's come up to honor Yahweh in the Torah. May the set-apart one bless him and his family and send blessing and prosperity on all the works of his hands. Amen. Okay, we're going into chapter 12 now. Read verses 1 through 16.
These are the laws and right rulings which you guard to do in the land which Yahweh, Elohim of your fathers, is giving you to possess all the days you live on the soil. Completely destroy all the places where the nations which you are dispossessing serve their mighty ones, on the high mountains and on the hills and under every green tree. And you shall break down their slaughter places, and smash their pillars, and burn their Asherim with fire. And you shall cut down the carved images of their mighty ones, and shall destroy their name out of that place. Do not do so to Yahweh your Elohim, but seek the place which Yahweh your Elohim chooses out of all your tribes to put his name there for his dwelling place, and there you shall enter. And there you shall take your ascending offerings, and your slaughters, and your tithes, and the contributions of your hand, and your vowed offerings, and your voluntary offerings, and the firstlings of your herd and of your flock. And there you shall eat before Yahweh your Elohim, and shall rejoice in all that you put your hand to, you and your households, in which Yahweh your Elohim has blessed you. Do not do as we are doing here today, each one doing whatever is right is in his own eyes, because you have not entered the rest and the inheritance which Yahweh your Elohim is giving you. But you shall pass over the Jordan, and shall dwell in the land which Yahweh your Elohim is giving you to inherit. And he shall give you rest from all your enemies round about, and you shall dwell in safety. And it shall be that unto the place which Yahweh your Elohim chooses to make his name dwell there, there you are to bring all that I command you, your ascending offerings, and your slaughterings, and your tithes, and the contributions of your hand, and all your choice offerings which you vow to Yahweh. And you shall rejoice before Yahweh your Elohim, you and your sons and your daughters and your male servants and your female servants and the Levite who is within your gates, since he has no portion nor inheritance with you. Guard yourself that you do not offer your ascending offerings in every place that you see, except in the place which Yahweh chooses in one of your tribes. There you are to offer your ascending offerings, and there you are to do all that I command you. 16. Only whatever your being desires you shall slaughter and eat, according to the blessing of Yahweh your Elohim, which he has given you within all your gates. The unclean and the clean do eat of the gazelle and the deer alike. Only the blood you do not eat. Pour it on the earth like water.
Thank you. Sorry, I was just writing notes. Okay. We'll make sure we're going next. We're going 17 to the chapter. Okay. Amy, he who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Amy, who's come up to honor Yahweh and the Torah. May the set apart one bless her and her family, and send blessing and prosperity in all the works of her hands. Amen. Okay, you're going to take us now from verse 17 to the end of the chapter.
You are not allowed to eat within your gates the tithe of your grain, or of your new wine, or of your oil, or of the firstlings of your herd, or your flock, or of any of your offerings which you vow, or of your voluntary offerings, or of the contribution of your hand. But eat them before Yahweh your Elohim in the place which Yahweh your Elohim chooses, you and your son and your daughter, and your male servant and your female servant, and the Levite who is within your gates. And you shall rejoice before Yahweh your Elohim in all that you put your hands to. Guard yourself that you do not forsake the Levite as long as you live in your land. When Yahweh your Elohim enlarges your border as he has promised you, and you say, let me eat meat, because you long to eat meat, you eat as much meat as your being desires. When the place where Yahweh your Elohim chooses to put his name is too far from you, then you shall slaughter from your herd and from your flock which Yahweh has given you, as I have commanded you, and you shall eat within your gates as much as your being desires. Only as the gazelle and the deer are eaten, so you are to eat of it. The unclean and the clean alike eat of it. Only be strong, do not eat the blood, for the blood is the life. Do not eat the life with the meat. Do not eat it. You pour it on the earth like water. Do not eat it, that it might be well with you and your children after you, when you do what is right in the eyes of Yahweh. Only the set-apart gifts which you have and your vowed offerings you are to take up and go to the place which Yahweh chooses. And you shall make your ascending offerings, the meat and the blood, on the slaughter place of Yahweh your Elohim. And the blood of your slaughterings is poured out on the slaughter place of Yahweh your Elohim, and you eat the meat. Guard and obey all these words which I command you, that it might be well with you and your children after you forever, when you do what is good and right in the eyes of Yahweh your Elohim. When Yahweh your Elohim does cut off from before you the nations which you go to dispossess, and you dispossess them and dwell in their land, guard yourself that you are not ensnared to follow them after they are destroyed from before you, and that you do not inquire about their mighty ones, saying, how did these nations serve their mighty ones? And let me do so too. Do not do so to Yahweh your Elohim, for every abomination which Yahweh hates they have done to their mighty ones, for they even burn their sons and daughters in the fire to their mighty ones. All the words I am commanding you, guard to do it. Do not add to it, nor take away from it.
Amen. Amen. Okay, Tom. See, now, if the same people keep coming up all the time, name tag or not, I'll finally learn your names. It'll work out. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Tom, who's come out of Yahweh in the Torah. May the set-apart one bless him and his family and send blessing and prosperity on all the works of his hands. Amen. Okay, you're going to go ahead and read us chapter 13, the whole chapter.
When there arises among you a Navi or a dreamer of dreams, and he shall give you a sign or a wonder, and the sign or the wonder shall come true, of which he has spoken to you, saying, let us go after other mighty ones, which you have not known, and serve them. Do not listen to the words of the Navi, or that dreamer of dreams, for Yahweh your Elohim is trying you to know whether you love Yahweh your Elohim with all your heart and with all your being. After Yahweh your Elohim, walk after Yahweh your Elohim and revere him, and guard his commands and obey his voice, and serve him and cling to him. And that Navi, or that dreamer of dreams, is put to death, because he has spoken apostasy against Yahweh your Elohim, who brought you out of the land of Mitzrayim, and redeemed you from the house of bondage, to make you stray from the way in which Yahweh your Elohim commanded you to walk. Thus you shall purge the evil from your midst. When your brother, the son of your mother, or your son or your daughter, or the wife of your bosom, or your friend who is as your own being, entices you secretly, saying, let us go and serve other mighty ones, which you have not known, neither you nor your fathers, of the mighty ones of the people which are all around you, near to you or far from you, from one end of the earth to the other end of the earth. Do not agree with him or listen to him, nor shall your eye pardon him, nor spare him or conceal him. But you shall certainly kill him. Your hand is first against him to put him to death, and afterward the hand of all the people. And you shall stone him with the stones until he dies, because he sought to entice you away from Yahweh your Elohim, who brought you out of the land of Mitzrayim, from the house of bondage. And let all Yisrael hear and revere, and not again do any such evil matter as this in your midst. When you hear someone in one of your cities, which Yahweh your Elohim gives you to dwell in, saying, some men, sons of Belial, have gone out of your midst and led the inhabitants of their city astray, saying, let us go and serve other mighty ones, which you have not known. Then you shall inquire, search out, and ask diligently, and see if the matter is true and established, that this abomination was done in your midst. You shall certainly smite the inhabitants of that city with the edge of the sword, putting it under the ban, and all that is in it and its livestock with the edge of the sword. And gather all of its plunder into the midst of the street, and completely burn with fire the city and all its plunder before Yahweh your Elohim. And it shall be a heap forever, never to be built on again. And none of that which is put under the ban is to cling to your hand, so that Yahweh turns from the fierceness of his displeasure and shall show you compassion. Love you and increase you, as he swore to your fathers. When you obey the voice of Yahweh your Elohim to guard all his commands, which I command you today, to do what is right in the eyes of Yahweh your Elohim.
Amen. Amen. All right, we got two more readers. Tommy, come up. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Tommy, who's come up to honor Yahweh in the Torah. May the set-apart one bless him and his family and send blessing and prosperity on all the works of his hands. Amen. Okay, Tommy's going to take us into chapter 14 and read verses 1 through 20.
You are the children of Yahweh your Elohim. Do not cut yourselves, nor shave the front of your head for the dead. For you are a set-apart people to Yahweh your Elohim, and Yahweh has chosen you to be a people for himself, a treasured possession above all the peoples who are on the face of the earth. Do not eat whatever is abominable. These are the living creatures which you do eat, ox, sheep, and goat, deer and gazelle and roebuck and wild goat and mountain goat and antelope and mountain sheep. And every beast that has a split hoof divided in two, chewing the cud, among the beasts you do eat. But of those chewing the cud, or those having a split hoof completely divided, you do not eat, such as these, the camel and the hare and the rabbit, for they chew the cud, but do not have a split hoof. They are unclean for you. And the pig is unclean for you, because it has a split hoof, but does not chew the cud. You do not eat their flesh or touch their dead carcasses. These you do eat of all that are in the waters, all that have fins and scales you do eat. And whatever does not have fins and scales you do not eat. It is unclean for you. Any clean bird you do eat, but these you do not eat: the eagle and the vulture and the black vulture and the red kite and the falcon and the buzzard after their kinds, and every raven after its kind, and the ostrich and the nighthawk and the seagull and the hawk after their kinds, the little owl and the great owl and the white owl and the pelican and the carrion vulture and the fisher owl and the stork and the heron after its kind and the hoopie and the bat. And every creeping insect that flies is unclean for you. They are not eaten. Any clean bird you do eat.
Amen. Amen. Okay, thank you, Tommy. All right, Charlie. He who blessed our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may you bless Charlie, who's come down to Yahweh in the Torah. May the set-apart one bless him and his family and send blessing and prosperity on all the works of his hands. Amen. Okay, Charlie's going to take us now from verse 21 to the end of the chapter.
Do not eat whatever dies of itself. Give it to the stranger who is within your gates, to eat it or to sell it to the foreigner. For you are a set-apart people to Yahweh your Elohim. Do not cook a young goat in its mother's milk. You shall tithe without fail all the field of your grain that the field brings forth year by year. And you shall eat before Yahweh your Elohim in the place where he chooses to make his name dwell. The tithe of your grain and your new wine and your oil and the firstlings of your herd and your sheep, so that you learn to fear Yahweh your Elohim always. But when the way is too long for you, so that you are not able to bring the tithe, or when the place where Yahweh your Elohim chooses to put his name is too far from you, when Yahweh your Elohim is blessing you, then you shall give it in silver, and shall take the silver in your hand and go to the place which Yahweh your Elohim chooses. And you shall use the silver for whatever your being desires, for cattle or sheep, for wine or strong drink, for whatever your being desires. And you shall eat there before Yahweh your Elohim, and you shall rejoice, you and your household. And do not forsake the Levite who is within your gates, for he has no part nor inheritance with you. At the end of every 3rd year, you bring out all the tithe of your increase of that year and store it up within your gates. And the Levite, because he has no portion nor inheritance with you, and the sojourner, and the fatherless, and the widow, who are within your gates, shall come and eat and be satisfied, so that Yahweh your Elohim does bless you in all the work of your hands, which you do.
Amen. Amen. Okay, thank you to Charlie. Thank you to all the readers. Excellent job. Get reconfigured here. Okay, again, I want to thank all the readers. Excellent job. And then we have the traditional closing prayer. Baruch atah Yahweh Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu torat emet, v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch atah Yahweh noten haTorah. Amen. Blessed are you, Yahweh our Elohim, King of the universe, who has given us a Torah of truth and has planted eternal life in our midst. Blessed are you, Yahweh, giver of the Torah. Amen. Amen. All right. Wow, there was a month's worth of stuff in that one little, there was a lot in that one, wasn't there? I mean, there was so much in that one, I can't even joke that there wasn't like anything in that one, okay? It was just too much. All right, let me just go over again the announcements for the people that came in a little bit later, just a reminder of some of the things going on here real quickly. We have the Shofar Clinic today after lunch, then the marketplace will be open probably also during the clinic. And then tonight, I want to encourage you to enjoy fellowship time, and we do have some counseling sessions. Tomorrow is free day. All right, tomorrow is free day. So again, a reminder, we are only, for those of you on the meal plan, you have only breakfast. Okay, so you'll need to plan to figure out what to do off property for the day. It should be a beautiful day. I don't think it's going to be raining tomorrow. I think it should be good. And as this is going to clear up later this afternoon. Excuse me. All right, so you should be good to go there. Enjoy, be safe, etc. And then we'll see you back for the ladies in the Marco Polo group. Rebbitzin would love to meet with you ladies tomorrow night, 8 o'clock, in the lobby upstairs in the main building, the Ridgecrest main building, which is the building off towards the entrance from where we eat, from the dining hall, okay? So it's that main entrance. I think it's got the pillars in front, etc., okay? So you'll meet there if you want at 8 o'clock tomorrow night. Okay, also Rabbi Tom would like to announce that he will be leaving the lulavs, by the outside door of the ark here for those who want to use them tomorrow. So they'll be available out here. Okay. All right, so the discussion for this section, and there's a bunch of stuff in here. I'm going to try to keep track of time as best I can to make sure that we're on schedule, because I want to make sure we do cover a couple of things, but we are going to go through the discussion portion. If you have a comment or question, you can come on up in the front row here. We've got chairs. Live stream, you can go ahead and type them in. We have Kurt and Rob monitoring the live stream. Okay. So, but we do have the chairs up here in the front row for anybody who wants to come up. All right, Steve, we can start with you. Now, we do try to go chronologically, so we would like to try to start with things that are somewhat towards chapter 7 as we work our way all the way across through to chapter 14. And like I said, we do have a lot to cover here. I wish you know what, maybe one of these years we'll just do it in the morning and the afternoon, and we'll just do it all day long. And we'll just kind of get it all in it, because, I mean, we could spend all day easily on this whole little section of a couple of chapters. All right, Steve, what you got?
Okay, I have to write it down so I get it. I'm on chapter 8 in the very first few verses. It seems like we always get stuck when we see the increase, so I wanted to say this. It seems like we only rejoice at the increase, yet when it comes to being humbled or proven, we want to fight, yell, and rebel, when actually it's showing us what's in our heart. And I think that's what's shocking and embarrassing to us, because it's which it brings out our anger, because now we see a weakness which we're lacking. And if we embrace the weakness, it's only then we can experience a real increase, because that's what will allow us to improve where we're lacking. I said that.
Amen. Okay, so I'm going to try to change that into English, and I like to tease. I speak Steve, so I understand that.
That's scuba, and then you got mail.
There you go. Okay. All right. So I think what he's trying to say is like we are excited about the part of this where he says, and you'll have abundance and you'll rejoice and I'm going to bless you with all these things. But he also says that through this whole process, you're supposed to get humbled and there will be discipline. And notice that he actually talks about that in chapter 8, in the earlier part of the chapter, before he gets to the, I'm going to give you all this abundance and you're going to have houses and flocks and all this great stuff. But there's a disciplining as a part of the process that then leads to the abundance. Some of you may be wondering, well, where's my abundance? Well, maybe it's because you're not hearing and receiving the discipline. Okay? And so that's really part of the process. Now, in chapter 8, of course, that's where we get what we call Birkat HaMazon, or the blessing after the meal. Because in verse 10 it says, and you shall eat and be satisfied, and shall bless Yahweh your Elohim for the good land which he has given you. And then down in verse 18 it says, but you shall remember Yahweh your Elohim, for it is he who gives you the power to get the wealth. And notice that it's in order to establish his covenant, which he swore to your fathers as it is today. So there's really no instructional command to pray before a meal. This isn't even really an instructional command to pray after a meal. I mean, he basically says that when you've received all your blessings, you should always be looking to bless him in a thankful way, like an appreciation blessing for all you have. So by tradition, we are allowed to do anything that does not either interfere with Torah or go against Torah. And so you see Yeshua's blessing when he breaks the bread and before he drinks of the cup. You see here that there's blessings that are going on with Abraham and Melchizedek. They bless and then they have their meal. And so one of the traditions that we have is to pray before. Another tradition is to pray after. Some people pray during. I mean, those are all good things. Just recognize that there's no Torah command to do any of this stuff, so that if somebody forgets to do it, you're not in trouble. Okay? Now, that's one of the things I know people look forward to when we're in a group. You know, after our services, we have an oneg, we have a meal. And at the end of the meal, you know, I get up and I ask the question based on verse 10. It says, and you shall eat and be satisfied and blessed. So I ask them, have you eaten and are you satisfied? You know? And everybody looks forward to that. And the way we eat, oh yeah, they've eaten and they are satisfied. The food is always good. Okay? All right. So we have that going on there in chapter 8. Okay, who's next? And then remind everybody who you are.
My name's Javier.
Hi, Javier.
How you doing? In 8:18, when it says that Yah gives us wealth in order to establish his covenant, would you say that that would be the purpose of him blessing us with wealth, is solely to establish his covenant and all the things that he would do through us?
Yes. Now let's remember, you could take this in two ways. You could say that he gave you the wealth so that you can use the wealth to support a ministry, so to speak. In other words, getting this message out. But it's also about being the hill, the city on the hill that's there to say, look at all the wealth and abundance they have. Where is it coming from? And then we on the hill can say, it's coming from him. Well, why is it coming from him? Because we're covenanted with him. Okay, so it establishes this is what covenant looks like when you do it. So it's a visual that people can see. Remember, we talk about our walk being our message, more than our words being our message. And so you have that, but also you have the ability with wealth to provide things to support the, like the availability that we're doing here. Or like in the years back when they would make scrolls, or they had to support people that would go out into towns to make themselves available, etc. When you see the apostles going out. So the wealth can work in all kinds of forms. But realize in its most simplest form, because he's talking about building houses and all these, and having, cattle and farms, and it's the visual where people go, wow, why are you guys so blessed? And that is part of establishing his covenant. It also establishes his covenant from one other point. We agreed to listen. What did he agree to do? Give us all this stuff. So it establishes his side of the covenant. Okay, so he gives you the wealth so that you can have and the proof that his side of the covenant is being done. Amen? All right, good question. Okay, next person. Okay, Lucy or Lisa. We know you as both.
Is it off?
If the
One,
light's
two.
on, it means it's muted, so that's why.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm up to chapter 12. Is that a problem?
You're up to chapter 12. Let's wait to get there for a second. Does anybody else have 7 or 8? You're on 10. All right, there's a bunch of things I want to do first real quickly through 7 and 8 before we even get to 10. Anything on live stream for 7 or 8? Nope. Okay. All right, let me go through a couple of my bullet points real quickly then. From chapter 7. Let's see. Now, in verse 12 through 14, it says, "And it shall be because you hear these right rulings and shall guard to do them, that Yahweh Elohim shall guard with you with a covenant." Okay, just remember, that's a reestablishing. He's all through these chapters, he's reaffirming over and over the covenant, the relationship that you need to do, obey, follow, cling to, okay? But he's reminding us that the covenant has both sides to it. He says, look, and it is because you hear and do, right? You hear these right rulings and guard and do them, that Yahweh is going to guard his side of it. When we break it, he boots us out of the land. He says, I'm not obligated to give you my part of it when you break your part of it. So just realize, I like the way it's phrased. He says, and it shall be because you hear and you do and you guard the right rulings, okay? And he's not saying because you hear and you love me, or you hear and you believe I exist. He says because you hear these laws, this Torah, these right rulings, and you guard and do them. This isn't everybody's Bible. I mean, I know that there's all of that Christian, the law's done away with thing, but I don't know how you could read all this and think that makes any sense. All of the blessing from the Genesis all the way through to before you get to Matthew is based on if you hear and do them, you receive this. And so we're to believe that, well, I guess that was just too tough, so we're just going to wipe that all out. Now you just have to have an emotional feeling about Messiah and something. I don't know. All right? It just doesn't make any sense. He says, if we hear and do them, I will do my part of it. This is the basic covenant. So when people talk about the new covenant isn't any different than the old one, except that this time we're not going to break it, hopefully. Some of us will and some of us won't, but there will be a bunch that won't break it this time. It's still going to be about him speaking and us listening. No different. I mean, the creator of the universe did not waste 2,000 years of saying, you need to do this stuff, because that's about what, I guess, from about Moses to Yeshua, just to say, nah, that was a bad idea. The problem was in the law. No, the law is perfect. The problem is in the people trying to implement it. That's the problem. He asked human beings to do this stuff. And we're too selfish, we're too self-sovereign, we're too a lot of mess. Which is why, by the way, he says over and over again that he did these things because of what he swore to the fathers, not because these guys were so great. And that comes up a couple of times here in the chapters. He said, look, I've done all this stuff, but it's not because you're so awesome. It's because I made a promise to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. When he says fathers, he doesn't mean like they're... See, that's again, remember we were talking about last night on the Torah study, but also on yesterday's first Deuteronomy readings. A lot of this stuff is not taken in the absolute literal. So when he says your fathers, he doesn't mean they're next generation up fathers. He's talking about Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Okay? So we have to remember those things. But we have to hear, guard, and do. And by the way, you hear that a lot in these 4 chapters that we read, 7, 8, 9, actually 7 chapters, okay, all the way through 14. Okay, we have a lot going on here that he's over and over again saying, look, you guys think I'm hitting this all the time? I'm just reading it to you. He smacks it every other verse, it sounds like, in this section of Deuteronomy. Tell all your friends. Look, this happened to me one time where a guy, started to, I guess he was headed down the Messianic path, the Torah Observant path, and somehow he felt inspired to spend a month doing nothing but reading Galatians and Hebrews. Nothing wrong with those books, by the way, unless you don't have any context and don't understand a word Paul's saying, which is like almost everybody out there. Okay? Especially those of you now after journeying through almost the entire book of Hebrews with me through the covenant series. You are like, now you understand maybe what, the writer of Hebrews is talking about. So he said after doing that for a month, he gave up the Torah observance, decided it was all, a sham. And he said to me in the email, he says, I hope you will show enough respect as to read my document that I sent, about why he made all these changes. And I said, okay. And then I sent him back an email. I said, okay, now I'm going to ask you to show enough respect to read my email, and I'm going to challenge you. I'm not going to give you a document, but I'm going to ask you to spend 30 days, you did that with Galatians and Hebrew, spend 30 days reading Deuteronomy and Psalm 119. See if you end up in the same place. And then also ask yourself the question, which has higher authority? Deuteronomy and Psalm 119, written by Moses and David, or Paul's writing? I'm not against Paul, but he is the least ranked person in your book. He has the least authority. He still has tremendous authority. But when you put it in the hierarchy, if the book, a lot of you have a scriptures which has the books in a Hebraic or Jewish order, right? So you end with 2 Chronicles instead of Malachi. We should reorder the New Testament so that it should end with Paul's writings. You should go through the Gospels, then you should go through, John and Peter and James, then you should get to Paul. Because if you can go through it in that order, it will make more sense. You also understand where the authority is, and you can see the flow. It's just something I wanted to bring out, because this is the kind of nonsense that we have. And so if you read the Tanakh, you have to be saying, man, he seems really set on this. Do what I say. Don't do what I say not to do. Covenant with me. Cling. There's a lot of this clinging. We have a teaching, right? Cling, cleave, hold fast. And so you want to make sure that you have that. And he's very, very clear about that here in these chapters. I'll cover this. Okay, I'm sorry. I was in chapter 7. We should have been chapter 8, right? That was from yesterday. Well, there was stuff we didn't cover yesterday. So there you go. You know why? Because in my readings that we do on the weekly Torah portions, this Torah portion actually is called a Kev, and it starts in chapter 7. Okay? But then we get to chapter 8 with the Birkat HaMazon, and that's where we covered that. And then verse 19 of chapter 8. Okay, this is important. In it says, and it shall be if you by any means forget. There's lots of ways we can forget. We could forget by not really forgetting, but by choosing an alternate path that alters everything about him. So we're not really forgetting him, but we're forgetting what he said and what he really is and who he really is. But if you by any means forget Yahweh your Elohim and follow other mighty ones and serve them and bow down yourself to them, as I've warned you, this day that you shall certainly perish. But he's trying to make you understand that this is a difference between perishing. By the way, perishing is not tortured forever in a hell place. It's perishing. There's a choice that you make. He says you can choose perishing or eternal life. Moses just calls it simply life and death. Choose life. Okay? By any means, he says. This is really a challenge. Okay? Because it's in verse 16. He says, his desire is that you be humbled so that he can do you good in the end. He wants to do you good in the end. And this is very important that, we know we struggle at times, and he says, but you got to remember, all things work to the good. Well, what's the good? His plan. It doesn't mean that everything's going to be popping up roses for you at every moment. But ultimately, it's working out towards the good. If you don't understand the scriptural understanding of what good is, then you might want to go back and listen to the teaching called Well Done, Good and Trustworthy Servant. Okay, because the first part of that defines from Scripture good. Yeshua says there's none good but one. And so he points to the Father. Okay. Do we have anybody then to chapter 9? You do. You want to go back to 7? Because I know we didn't really cover, because we got busy in earlier parts of the readings yesterday, so we didn't really get to 7. So go ahead, Amy. You could ask him something about 7.
Okay, so it's just kind of a general question.
You can come up here.
just listening to these chapters while I was sitting up there and everyone is reading, like you said, there's so much about guarding. And when I was listening to the message you did from the Holy Day, you talked about the difference between just keeping commandments versus guarding, and you gave Shabbat as an example. And I was thinking about myself in Shabbat and thinking that I start out with the intent to guard, but then, when I'm at the congregation and, I'm greeting everybody and whatnot in the kitchen, then I feel like maybe I end up just keeping because I get caught up in conversations that maybe aren't Shabbat worthy. So I was wondering if you could help me understand what would be appropriate things to discuss. I need a reminder of what is appropriate to discuss on Shabbat and what is not, because I feel like I get caught up visiting with people because I haven't seen them. I only get to see them on Shabbat.
Okay, these are good questions. And look, again, when he said in that verse we said where it says, if you by any means forget, that's not that you forget he exists, but you get distracted from being focused on, aware of what he wants you doing at any given moment. And that's kind of what we're talking about here. Because you can get wrapped up in life and just not be aware of him. So that's what he means by forget. If you remember, you're supposed to have him as all your heart, all your being. It's supposed to be in what he says, pray always. It's not really like literally praying, but it's having that vertical awareness at all times. And we can be distracted by lots of things to interfere with that vertical awareness, okay? And so conversations, look, I cracked up and was frustrated when I went to a congregation in New York. It was a Messianic Jewish congregation. And during the oneg, everybody was having a great time talking about the playoff game with the basketball thing was going on at that time. And I believe the game was Friday night, so I'm assuming they saw it. So they watched the game Friday night, and then they were talking about it all through the oneg. They were missing the point. Now, it's okay to, on Shabbat, he wants us also to love each other. So it's okay to catch up with each other to a certain degree, but you don't need to spend an hour talking about the latest book that you read or the movie you saw last week or something, that you saw on some article somewhere. That's not what we're talking about. You can find out how things are going. You can find out if there's some family stuff going on. Sharing with each other your life a little bit is quite appropriate, but we want to be focusing it on in the context of what he's doing. Now, part of what he's doing is building community. Okay? So like I said when we were talking about it the other day, I wouldn't sit there as my wife had a pile of like 800 pictures from Paris and France and all over. I wouldn't do that on Shabbat. I would spend maybe 3 minutes to say, oh, my trip was wonderful, it was a blessing, and then, hey, I'd love to sit with you later and show you the pictures. Okay. Nothing wrong with that. Or if someone says, how did that thing work out at work? Well, actually, blah, blah, blah. Okay, what you should be saying is, it went great or it didn't go great, I can tell you more about it after Shabbat. They're just wanting a quick update. Give them a quick little, bullet point to what's going on, but don't sit there and say, oh, you have no idea, let me tell you what happened. The next thing you know, all you're focused on is the nonsense that happened at work for the next hour. Okay? Does that make any sense? So there's a level of it that I think would be absolutely appropriate to say this and that is happening to whatever degree, because he wants us to, as a community, when we come together, show that loving concern for each other, getting to know each other, etc. But we have to be careful that we're getting to that any means forgetting thing. And so you can get caught up into something longer than would be appropriate. Okay? Same thing even with health. How are you doing? I know you weren't doing well last week. Oh, let me tell you what happened, and it was all of the, and next thing you know, you have an hour about the whole health thing. Or maybe it's great because it's an hour about the miracles of how you got healed. Keep it shorter. Bring it together, especially the healing part, that you can go a little further. Hey, Yah really did a great thing. All these things came into place. Now you're giving him all the glory. When the thing was bad, we don't need to hear all the details at that point of everything that went wrong. You can say, I heard you weren't feeling well. Oh, let me tell you what happened. Or I heard you had a problem with your car. You get the whole story. Yes, I had a problem with my car. It's a long story. I'll talk to you after Shabbat. Does that kind of make sense? Okay? All right. Did that help?
It did. And then I have just one other question. So if I feel like I'm caught in the middle of a conversation that's going too long, how's a good way to try to either stop it or redirect it?
There's a 50-50 shot the other person will get offended no matter what you do. And I'm being generous with the 50-50. Okay? So as softly and gently and smiling that you can do, say, I really would like to hear the rest of this. Can we talk about it after? Don't say, I really would like to hear the rest of this, but it's not appropriate for Shabbat. Okay?
Don't be straightforward. Okay.
Just say, I really would love to hear the rest of this. Can we talk about it after, after Shabbat? Okay?
Thank you, Rabbi.
You're welcome. Okay, Steve?
10.
Okay, you wanted to get to, okay, do we have anything else in 9? I got a bunch for 9 first. They got some 9, okay. And then, okay, Anders, and then we'll give it to the live stream. I want to go through 9, because I got about 7 or 8 things for 9.
All right, thank you, Rabbi. This is 9 and verse, 21. And I took your sin, the calf which you had made, and burned it with fire, and crushed it, and ground it very small, until it was as fine as dust. And I threw its dust into the stream that came down from the mountain. And I came to mind that saying you have that own it, fix it, and release it. And I had one more instance also in chapter 13 on the same theme. In chapter 13, verse 16, is saying, and gather all its plunder into the middle of the street, and completely burn with fire the city, and all its plunder before Yahweh your Elohim, and it shall be a heap forever, and never to be built again. And none of that which is put under the ban is to cling to your hand. So again, that came to mind, that own it, fix it, release it.
Amen. Very nice. We're going to have those next year for T-shirts, I think. All right, go ahead.
All right, Marie wants to know, so what does it mean in 9:15, the mountain burned?
Okay, so there were, and it was very much like you see also in Acts chapter 15, and in Acts 2, when you see the whole, the fires, etc. Everything that happened on the mountain in Exodus is very much like in Acts. There were thunderings, there were rumblings, like the rushing of the winds was like thunderings, and then you had the fire. There really was smoke on the mountain. I mean, it was like they saw what looked like it would be a fire, like the top of the mountain was burning. Okay? Matter of fact, there's a mountain that they believe is Sinai, out in the Middle East there, and it does look like it's been burned on the top. Okay, it's much darker. The stone and everything is much darker. It looks like it's been burned on the top. Okay, go ahead.
All right, this one's for me, is 9:12, and Yah is talking to Moshe, and he tells him to go down and says, for your people whom you brought out of Mitzrayim have acted corruptly. So is Yah the leadership thing, or is this?
Yeah, no, this is always, when Yah interacts with leadership, there's always a testing of that leadership. You see this with Abraham. You see it with Jacob. You don't see it as much with Isaac. There's not as much interaction like that. But you see it with Moses here. When he's working with leadership, there's always these little tests going on. And so, when he says here, okay, arise, go down quickly, for your people whom you brought out of Egypt have acted corruptly. But you notice Moses gets involved right away, and he's like, oh, hold on a second, I'm going to handle this. Okay? But every time he goes to want to destroy them and things like that, Moses gets involved. But you got to remember, he's also getting involved from the point of view, and I wrote this down, I think, on my other sheet. In 9:14, it says, leave me alone so that I destroy them and blot out their name from under the heavens and make you a nation, stronger, etc. And then he says, do I got the right, that was verse, not in 14. I think I wrote the wrong verse number here. Hold on, where he then says, okay, so leave me alone. Yes, verse 19, thank you. I wrote 14 in my notes here. Okay, so 19. He said, but Yah listened to me. But Yahweh instead listened to me that time once more. Now, this whole thing with listening almost sounds like, Moses is in charge. Think of it more like I beseeched him and he heard my prayer. And he answered my prayer, so to speak. Because you do the same thing, right? You'll seek him and you'll pray. And sometimes he'll answer the way you had hoped for. Are you going to sit there and go, well, he listened to me? No, he heard you. And he decided to answer in the manner that you had wanted. Okay? He's always hearing you. And so he's trying to communicate that I asked for something, and that one time, and he said one more time here, he said once more, he decided to do as I had asked. Because he asked him many times, well, don't kill them, don't destroy them. And I don't think God had any intention to do that. He was really trying to make sure, Moses, I put you in a very highly, potentially corruptible position. I'm about to put you in charge. You're in charge of several million people. They're going to give you an incredible amount of wealth to do different things, including building the tabernacle. Can I trust you with this people? Because you're leading millions of people. So he was always doing a little pulse check on Moses, just to check in and make sure where he's at.
Yeah, Rabbi, verse 29 is where Moses now puts it back on Yahweh. He says, your people. So
Yes.
He says, yeah, they're not mine, they're yours, and gives them proper account.
Right. Okay? And so, he says, and they are your people and your inheritance whom you brought out. So this is part of the test, though. Because Moses could get to feel like, well, look, I did this and I did that and I brought, And so Yah's like wanting to see what's going on. He said, well, your people who you brought out, just in case you think this is all about you somehow. Because Moses was as powerful as any king, more so in some ways, because the people were wanting to follow him as opposed to being imposed on. And so they could easily start thinking, Moses is our hero. Moses brought us out of Egypt. Moses, Moses, Moses. And Yahweh was giving him a little, what do we call it, like a little snap quiz, just to see where he was at. And that's the way I think that was playing out. So good points there. Okay, who else had chapter 9? Okay, let me hit a couple of other things real quickly here. Okay, in the beginning of chapter 9, we have that reality check. Okay, in verse 4 it says, do not think in your heart after Yahweh your Elohim has driven them out before you, saying, because of my righteousness Yahweh has brought me in to possess this land. But it is because of the wrong of the nations that Yahweh is driving them out from before you. So let's keep that in mind, that it's because of the wrong. So clear out, this is what he wants to do in our lives, clear out the wrong to provide space for the righteousness to dwell. Okay? He says, I'm not doing this because you're so great. They're wrong. I've been planning for you to be my instrument to clear that out. Because some people might say, well, why is it okay for Yahweh to just walk in there and they're clearing out all these peoples? He had his reasons. Israel was just the instrument for implementing that. He said it's because of their wrong. What wrong? We don't have all the details. But he was interacting with all the nations. He's always interacting with all the peoples on some level. And he said, I'm going to use you as the instrument to implement my justice on these people. We have to believe that. Otherwise, we have a hard time looking at him saying, wipe out everybody and everything, all the people, all the children, all the animals. And you sit there going, wow, that is so, almost an atrocity. And there are those who will point to the Bible and say it's filled with those kind of things. But he doesn't give us the details as to why that, needed to be done. Look, we know that the whole world except Noah needed to get wiped out at one point. And so imagine nations that are like that, like Noah's days, and they're in the land, and Yahweh says, I'm going to use you to wipe them all out of there. Part of my justice in the plan. And so we have to be careful that we don't get caught up in thinking, so it's kind of a big reality check. When he says, look, it's not because of your righteousness or uprightness of heart that you go in, but because of the wrong of these nations that Yahweh Elohim drives them out before you, in order to establish the word which Yahweh swore to your fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So he's kind of putting that together. And you shall know that Yahweh your Elohim is not giving you this good land to possess because of your righteousness, because I know you're a stiff-necked people. Remember what stiff-necked is all about. Not willing to bow down. Not to bow your head to any authority. I'm self-sovereign. I'm stiff-necked. So if you're that way, congratulations, you're definitely an Israelite. You come to that naturally. He says, and you shall know that Yahweh your Elohim is not giving you this good land because of your righteousness, but you're a stiff-necked people. He says, remember, and do not forget how you provoked to wrath, etc. I was going to go through a little dissertation so you know. So you did these things. Don't think you're so wonderful. So that's a humbling moment for us. Remember, we had that in chapter 8 and verse 2, right? And we quote that a million times. the whole point is being humbled so he can have an opportunity to have you prove whether or not it's in your heart to not be stiff-necked, to bow down. We had in the previous reading, it says, oh, that they would have such a heart in them as to listen and to follow and to submit themselves to me. And we don't often enough. I'm not saying we don't ever, otherwise you wouldn't be here. But we don't all too often, okay? So I look at that whole section there as kind of a reality check. He said, look in verse 7, he said, remember, do not forget how you provoked to wrath Yahweh your Elohim in the wilderness. From that day that you came, listen, from the day you came out of whatever you're in, your Egypt, your Mitzrayim, I'm going to extrapolate out and say, where is this in us? From the day I took you out of the mess you were in until we came to this place, wherever you are right now, he says, you have been rebellious against Yahweh. And you need to have a good little check in your system there to go, I don't mean check in your spirit like Christianity always says, I've got to check in my spirit. I mean, you need to literally check into and see where you've been rebellious. Where am I still not submitting to him? That's a whole different sort of mindset there. So I call that little section, a reality check, because it starts off with, do not think in your heart. What's that talking about? Your emotional state. Don't allow your emotions to get all involved in a way that gives you a problem with where you are in your relation with Yahweh. Either A, in the beginning of this in verse 4, he's talking about where you get all prideful and thinking you're all special. Christianity is all about making you feel special. We're special. We're called. We're so special, we're even more special than those who were before Messiah came in the flesh. We've got the Spirit. They didn't have the Spirit. Yes, they did. So dumb. I'm not saying that to mock. The system is lying to them with these ridiculous things. So you start off with that mindset. Then he says you're stiff-necked. And then he says you were rebellious ever since you even went, I was only rebellious before. No, he said, you've been rebellious since I brought you out of your mess. You're still struggling to just say, yes, sir. What you say, I will do. That's covenant. That's your reality check right there. Let's see. We covered the your people thing. 13, 14, we covered that one. Yeah, again, he says in 13, I've seen this people, and look, they are stiff-necked people. Verse 24, again, you've been rebellious against Yahweh from the day I knew you. There's only in one chapter. Look at how much he's kicking them in the teeth pretty hard. Some people get mad at me. I'm gentle. I'm just reading this stuff to you. In just this one little section, he said him a whole bunch of times. You're stiff-necked. You're rebellious. You've rebelled against me from the beginning. He says it twice. Because he's about to give them tremendous blessing and abundance. He says, you need to get it straight. You need to understand. I know who you are, he says. Problem is, you don't necessarily know who I am. It's that relational stuff. In verse 27, he says, remember, he says, your servants, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, he says, this is Moses praying on behalf of the people. He goes, do not look on the stubbornness of this people. And you guys are stubborn. We're human. We're stubborn. Okay? That's right. We got the I am stubborn t-shirts, right? Got a closet full of this stiff-necked, stubborn, self-righteous, everything. But he's calling you out. He's calling them out. He's right there. Look, this is like, in some ways, it's almost absurd. It's almost laughable because this is all happening right before they're about to cross into the land. And they're getting basically ripped wide open and exposed because he said, I'm about to give you the most unbelievable blessings and abundance, and you need to have the humility to understand where you came from and what is really expected of you, and more importantly, why you're getting this stuff. Why do you have this being provided for you? Well, because he promised Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But he also tells you don't get to keep it forever. See, this isn't a once saved, always saved, whatever. Actually, it's really funny. One of the guys out there attacking him, he said, well, I'm sure Rabbi, he didn't call me Rabbi. He said, I'm sure Steve Berkshire knows about the Passover. They only put the blood on the doorpost once. See, once saved, always saved. He says, and then there's another place where it says, the people went through the sea, and they passed through the sea, and they only did that once, so once saved, always saved. I'm thinking it's the same people. That's twice saved, always saved. The man is a biblical genius. And he's making YouTube videos with that kind of nonsense out there. Is he not aware that that'll happen within a week? They went from the blood doorpost thing to the sea. It was not very long. Same people. And by the way, that same people needed to be delivered, I don't know, dozens and dozens of times on that journey before they got to the Jordan over here. Do you guys, are you familiar with the verse where Yahweh said, I will not save you again. I've saved you 57,000 times. I've done my 70 times 70. They wore out the list. He said, I'm not saving you anymore. You're going to go and get the curses now. He delivered them multiple times. And by the way, there again, it wasn't saved, once saved, always saved. He said, I'm not saving you anymore. But it was hysterical when he said, well, they only put the blood on the doorpost once. That's true. They also only went through the sea once. That's true. Same people. That's two. So he wants us to have a clarity of where we came from, where we're going, and most importantly, why. Why is this journey being provided this way? And what he's requiring and expecting of us. Good? It's a big reality check there. Chapter 9, verses like 4 to 7 right there. Actually, all of chapter 9 is a big reality check. Okay, we're ready now to go to chapter, let me just check one more thing. Yes, we're ready to go to chapter 10. Right, now you got one more.
Amy wants to know in 9:21, is this like the Torah, the jealous husband? I think referring back to Numbers 5.
It probably could be linked in some way. I mean, I think when I've taught it, I've looked at that. Okay.
All right. Okay, for 10. For Deuteronomy 10:12.
I'm not familiar with that one.
Okay. Well, I won't read what it says, but for me, it seems to be, it's not what Yah is asking us, it's all about what we are not willing to lay down, give up in order to do that which we are being told to do. We need...
Put it up by your mouth.
All right, hold on here. I've lost track here. It's about what we're not laying down. I guess that's the point here is I think what he's asked us to do is simple. It's us arguing with ourselves and fighting with ourselves because we want to still hold on to those things which are not of him, which keeps us from walking as he's instructing us. So that's our biggest problem is our self-argument or fight over holding on to those things we want to bring along with, which should be left behind.
Okay, I just was looking something up in the newer translation. I wanted to see if it was the same. Thank you, Steve. That's good. Look, Deuteronomy 10:12, a lot of people talk about in Christianity the Romans road or whatever they call it, somehow this path to deliverance or salvation. Look, you want to know the path? Deuteronomy 10:12. That's your path. Because it says it right there. And now, Israel, what is it that Yahweh is asking of you? That's what you want to know what he expects? Well, I don't know what God expects of me. Go to read Deuteronomy 10:12. That's what he expects of you. He expects you to fear him. If you can't fear, that's what we always start. I used to always start recommending people to listen to fear of Yahweh first. Because you can't figure that out, nothing else is going to work. Once you get a proper fear of Yahweh, everything else should start to fall into place. And then because you fear him, what are you going to do? You're going to do what he says. You're going to walk in his ways. And specifically in all his ways. And then, of course, in walking in his ways, and many of you have heard me say this dozens of times. Some of you have never heard it, so I'm going to say it all through. But because we're walking in his ways, notice the order of things. We fearful. Fearful not as in trembling with fear, although that should be there too. But it's an awe and reverence to overflowing, a respect, a fear of disappointing, of letting down. And because of that, we start listening somewhat even mechanically. We start just doing what he said. But in doing, we see results. We see fruit. We see things come out of that doing that we realize he loves us. His instructions show us his love. And out of that, guess what happens next? We come to actually love him. See, the Christianity thing is much more of an emotional, almost like a teenage crush. You get those emotional crush. It's all emotional based. It's not based on substance. You're blown away by the person's looks or that they're, popular or whatever it is. You're all excited, some talent they have or something. You're all impressed with whatever, but you don't really know them. And so you're in love with an excited emotional image that you sort of have of them that you first got in your first impressions or whatever. But here we're fearing him and then we're walking in his ways. And through that process, we see first that he loves us. Now we can fall into an appropriate love of him, as opposed to just this excited hope that we might not have to die, that we could live forever. I mean, that's the first motivator, is realizing, wow, there's going to be a potential to take away all my pain, all my suffering, and I get to live forever. That's really the motivator. But then we start coming into a love relationship because we realize that he loves us. And then we fall in love with him. That's sort of the whole hype of the whole altar call thing. It's that emotional thing. I mean, I'd never really understood it. I wasn't ever in really a mainstream church, so I had never seen all these things. When I went many years ago, my wife and I, when we were sort of transitionally coming into this, we enjoyed mainstream, contemporary Christian music. Not anymore. Not into it. But we did at that time, and when we went to one of our last concerts, it was like one of those ones with multiple groups were singing 2 or 3, 4 songs. So we thought we'd give it a shot. We didn't end up enjoying it really at all, but it was our last time just realizing this isn't for us, okay? Many, many years ago. This is over 20 years ago. But when we went, they stopped at one point and said, would all the youth pastors and leaders come to the back of the stage? So I got up and I went backstage. And Julie looked at me and said, where are you going? I said, I'm going backstage. She said, well, you're not a youth leader. I said, yeah, but I want to know what they're doing. We had just had our home fellowship group, and we had just started, we may have even started our small group in Knoxville back then. And so I was still a rabbi. I was in there, ready. I was just wanted to know what they were doing. So I went back there, and one of the leaders of the band, I think the band was For Him, if you know the band. So it was Andy, the singer of the band. Anyway, so he announces he's going to do an altar call. I said, okay, all right, well, this will be interesting, I suppose. Let's see how this plays out. But this is the next thing he said blew my mind. He said, and I'm going to station you guys around the auditorium because once we do the altar call, mostly everybody in the room was much younger than my wife and I. They were all, teenage, like 17, 18 through 25, okay? We were already in our late 30s. And so, this was, we were by far the older in there. And they said, these people, these kids, listen, this is what blew my mind. They're going to have no idea what they just did, so we're going to direct them to you in the spots that we're stationing you around the auditorium. What? You're going to do something that's supposed to be a life-committing, huge-changing thing, and you're acknowledging that what you're doing through the hype and basically pressuring them to show up and come up and talk them into it, and you got the music going, whatever, that you're going to be getting them to do something that they don't know what they're doing. What is the point of that? Okay? Because they'll hype it up and they've got the music and they're saying the words to try to make you feel guilty that you don't come up. And they'll basically beg people out of their chairs, guilt them out of their chairs. Oh, don't let the person next to you stop you. The person next to me isn't doing anything. Oh, don't let this or whatever. Oh, you need to come up. And now they're doing peer pressure. The friends next to me actually, come on, go up there. And I was just not happy with that whole thing. So I went back, and I'm just got my head going like this, and my wife is like, what's the matter? I said, they're about to offer up the children to Molech. That's what I said. They got no idea what they're doing. So I'm sitting there, and I'm literally welling up with tears. And she's like, what? I said, I'm going to stand up and tell them to stop. So then she started praying harder than me. Please, Yahweh, don't let, no, not right, no. We're going to get arrested. They're going to, you know. And I didn't. But it took every bit of restraint I had not to. Because it was wrong in every way. Why would you do to somebody, hype them up into something, and then know that they have no idea what they're doing? You guys who were at the mikveh yesterday, you know that I made sure that you knew exactly what you were doing. Amen? And I even double-checked right before we went in. I said, here, I'm going to go over it again. Do you understand all this? Do you understand what we're doing and why we're doing it? And are you prepared to do all these things and take on the responsibilities? Why would you do something that they have no idea what they're doing? And need to station people like, this is the most cultish indoctrination thing I'd ever seen. And we're going to take these emotionally hyped up children, and they're all emotional, and they're crying, and they're excited, and they don't know why. And we're going to steer them in your direction so you can just take them and plug them into the system. It was disgusting. It was absolutely disgusting. But I was very glad that I went back to hear this. Because I'd never heard anybody talk about the manipulation they were about to put on our youth, or the adults. They do it to them too. Because I'd never been in that kind of a system. Okay? And so this was really, made a very important impression. So when you talk about what we really need to understand, it's right here. That's why I go back to Deuteronomy 10:12 all the time. Okay, you should know 8:2 and 10:12. I mean, there's no two ways around it. 8:2 tells you the whole point of life. You're here to be humbled and tested. How do you go about it? 10:12 tells you the path. You fear him. You walk in his ways, you start to see his love, then you fall in love with him. And then what's the natural expression after that? You serve him. Isn't that the order in 10:12? Right? He says, and you're going to walk in all his ways, love him, and serve him with all your heart and with all your being. But you're not going to serve him with all your heart and being until you fall in love with him, realizing he's already in love with you. That he loves you enough to give you guidance so that you're not walking around in confusion and lost and having no idea what to do with yourself. He tells you where the boundaries are. You want to see crazy? You have a bunch of children that have no boundaries. I mean, that's just bouncing off the walls, destructive craziness. Children, adults, we all need to know where the boundaries are. But we're funny. We're going to go right up to it. We want to get right to the edge of that boundary and poke at it a little bit just to see if it's real. Is it a real boundary? I wonder. It'd be nice if it actually zapped you. Then you'd learn. And sometimes it does. Sometimes you push that boundary and you get zapped. That's why. Because you weren't supposed to cross the border. Okay? Okay. It's like some of you, and I'm not scolding anybody, some of you see a row of tables back there and there's a small gap in it and you see me sitting on another table behind it and you just walk right through between the tables back to me. And I said to everyone who did it, I said, I see you crossed the barrier. And everybody chuckles like they don't know what I'm talking about. Okay, there's a reason I'm behind all these tables. And people just walk in because you're not even seeing barriers. Because I need a space where I can do things without everybody walking up and interrupting me and talking to me constantly. But you don't see the barrier. You see a little gap there. You go, I'll just walk right through. It doesn't upset me. I chuckle going, there's a physical barrier, and you just ignored it. Okay? But that's how we are. We think we should have access to everything. I can just go. Well, I don't see any barriers. We're stiff-necked. We do what we want. We're, prideful in that it's about me and I'm going to do what I want. And we're not even aware of all this stuff. It's just like, I see Rabbi, I want to talk to him, and you just walk right through. You don't even notice that there's a barrier in front of you. I've seen people move things out of the way. We put garbage pails and chairs, but that doesn't matter. They'll move them and walk right through. And not just here. We've done this at other places, done other things. People will just move barriers. It's like, that was there to stop you from doing what you just did. And so Abba gives us barriers. And they're designed they're designed for some purpose. Different barriers are for different purposes. Okay? So we have to look for those barriers. We have to look for those limitations. Not barriers like restrictions that are meant to hurt you. They're meant to keep you safe or meant to protect something that needs to have a space of its own. Okay? So it can go either way. Because I'm not barriered from you, but sometimes I need a space because I need to get something done uninterrupted. Okay? But I also like to be out where I am accessible, so from the other side of the barrier you can say, "Excuse me, Rabbi, can I talk to you for a minute?" And I can say yes or no. A little tougher when you've already walked over and you're in my face. Because now it's going to be much more embarrassing for you when I say, "You're in the space you don't belong in, you need to be on the other side." And then you go, "Oh, well, he's that way, excuse me." You know. Well, no, you walked in. I'm just using that as a small example. Like I said, I wasn't really that upset about the few people that did it. I'm just giving you an example of how simple this can look. Okay? Anyway, next question.
Yes, okay. On 7, I'm going back to 7:15. "And Yahweh shall turn away from you all sickness and put on you none of the evil diseases of Mizraim, which you have known, but he shall put them on all those who hate you." And then I was going over to Matthew 8:17. Let's see. Okay, "that it might be fulfilled what was spoken by Yeshua, the prophet, saying, he himself took our weaknesses and bore our sicknesses." And Yeshua said that he was the one. And I was thinking that right there it shows that he was the walking, talking Torah from Deuteronomy. And it just kind of hit me there that he was fulfilling that in that particular spot.
Amen. And then as Yeshua, when he starts pouring out the plagues in Revelation on all those that hate us, so that kind of matches up with here in Deuteronomy. Very nice. Okay, thank you, Sherry. Okay, who's next? I think we're in chapter 9 into 10 now. Oh, you know what? I want to go back to one thing because I have to honor my wife, the Rebbitzin, with the class that's going on now for the youth in chapter 8 and in verse, let me go back, 7 and 8. Okay? I ended up back in Matthew. Give me a second to get back to Deuteronomy. Okay, in chapter 8, verse 7 and 8, "So Yahweh your Elohim is bringing you into a good land, a land of streams of water, of fountains and springs that flow out of valleys and hills, a land of wheat, barley, vines, and fig trees, pomegranates, olive oil, and honey." Okay, we call this the 7 species, and you see the flags up on the wall there. We made banners. Okay, so you have the wheat and the barley and the grapes, and then on this side you have the figs, the pomegranates, the olives, and the dates, because that's what they made the oil out of, the honey out of, it was date honey. And so those are the 7 species. And your children are learning this week about the 7 species as metaphors for learning about Yahweh and Torah and Yeshua and all those good things. Okay, that's sort of the vehicle that they're using to teach the children this week. And it comes out of this section here in Deuteronomy chapter 8, verse 8. Okay, so you have listed the 7 things. Okay, now we go over to chapter 10. Who is...
I just saw this. It kind of sticks out to me. But then I write on the tablets the words that were on the first tablets, which you broke, and you shall put them in the ark, like representing your heart. I just kind of see it as a type and shadow of, what we're doing now, and it's the same words. Just because you broke them doesn't mean we changed the words. It's the same covenant. I just see that.
I like that. I don't think I've ever actually connected that dot. I appreciate that. Because there's your first covenant and your second covenant. When they talk about the new covenant, well, he gave them the covenant. They broke it. So he made another set. Now, of course, he does this in a very brief period of time. We're doing it in a much larger period of time. But this is, I think, a really nice picture of that. Thank you. And he says, and it was written on it exactly the same thing was written on the first set. But now you're getting a second chance at this. Very well played. I appreciate that. Okay, who's next? Okay, Anders? Whoop.
Thank you, Rabbi. Chapter 11, verse 10.
Oh, we're still in chapter 10. You're in 11 now. Any more for chapter? I've got some for chapter 10. No chapter 10s? Can I go now? Like I'm asking for permission. Okay. Chapter 10. Let me just make sure. Okay. Because I wrote some new notes today, and I have the older ones too. Okay, so in chapter 10, of course we did verse 10, 12, etc. Okay, verse 16. These are important verses. Sometimes I like to point out so you know where they are. It says, "And you shall circumcise the foreskin of your heart." So tell all of your Christian friends that it's not circumcision of heart now and it was circumcision of flesh then. It was always both. Okay? So sometimes you might want to know where the verse is. Well, here's one of them. Okay, Deuteronomy 10:16, "And you shall circumcise the foreskin of your heart and harden your neck no more." Okay, so that's, I think, very important that we get that. In 10 and in verse 8, we're going to go back to verse 8 for a second. It says, "At that time Yahweh separated the tribe of Levi to bear the ark of the covenant, to stand before Yahweh, to serve him, and to bless his name to this day." That's the role of anointed appointeds. Okay, whether it's Melchizedekian or whether it's Levitical. Not so much, the Levitical obviously had the part of bearing the ark, etc., but the idea of standing before Yahweh to serve him, to bless his name. And they're not just standing there just saying words to bless his name. Their actions and leading the people to do these things are blessing his authority, blessing his reputation, blessing who he is. Amen? Okay? So you see that's the role of those that are anointed and appointed in, as far as ministry is concerned. In verse 20, we have fear Yahweh, your Elohim, serve him, cling to him, swear by his name. There's that idea of clinging. And the idea of swearing by his name is about having integrity. Okay? So he's saying, look, I want you to fear him, serve him, cling, and have integrity. Okay? I told you we'd get through this fairly quickly. And in verse 15, when it says, Yahweh delighted only in your fathers to love them, and he chose their seed after them, you above all peoples, as it is today. So it's not that he didn't love all the creation. He said, look, but these are the special ones. It was Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I made promises to them, and that's why we're here. Okay? Okay, now we're ready to go to 11. So, Anders, you said you had something in 11?
Thank you, Rabbi. Chapter 11, verse 10. For the land which you're going in to possess is not like the land of Mizraim from which you have come, where you sowed your seed and watered it by foot as a vegetable garden. And I think that the seed is, instead of the word, it's our word instead, it's our way. And instead of the living water, it's water by food, it's dead water. And instead of hills and valleys, we have a vegetable garden with leeks, probably. But verse 11 says, but the land which you're passing over to possess is a land of hills and valleys, which drinks waters from the rain of the heavens, a land which Yahweh your Elohim looks after. Yeah. That was
very nice. Okay. Although I'm not sure I want to eat a salad that was made with things that were watered by foot, but that's just me. Okay. Anything else in chapter 11? I do. Okay, let's go with some things. All right. Verse 13. And it shall be that if you diligently obey. This is not only about guarding, but you have to be diligent about it. Because you can fall asleep on guard duty. Okay? Some of the military guys know how much trouble that'll get you in. You don't fall asleep on guard duty. And it shall be that if you diligently obey my commands, which I command you today, to love Yahweh your Elohim, to serve him with all your heart, with all your being, then I shall give you these things, okay? So just remember that these things are predicated on us first. I know it's him first in that he poked you, prodded you, got you aware, and had you interested to make this covenant, but then the receiving starts off with you. If we do these things, then he will do these things, all right? So it starts with him opening up your eyes, opening your ears, opening your heart, and then now it's in your hands. If you respond to that appropriately, to that prodding, to that poking, to that waking up, to all that stuff, if you respond to it appropriately, then you get all of this stuff. Then I give you the rain and its season, the early rain and the latter rain, and all this other stuff. So let's keep that in mind. That is that if, then. Okay, it shall be if. All right? In verses 18 to 20, we have the Ve'ahavta repeated there, which is just so in case you want to know, that's in Deuteronomy 6 as well as in Deuteronomy 11. And then, let's see, in verse 20, again, he reminds us the same thing in verse 22. Look, he just said it, now he's saying it again. For if you diligently guard all these commands, which I command you to do it, to love Yahweh your Elohim, to walk in all his ways. To clean. By the way, did you notice, and I did this in a teaching called Love in Torah, which I'm going to redo, okay, because that was done, I think, before we did video. Do you notice that almost everywhere, if not everywhere, that he says, I want you to do, he mentions love. Oh, no, those are the laws that were awful and against us and blah, 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 blah. Really? Every time he says commandments to do it, he talks about love. This is how we express his love. By the way, if you love me, keep my commandment. Boy, that sounds familiar. Oh, because he said it over here in this manifestation too. No surprise, he still wants us to show we love him by guarding commands. I mean, after all, he doesn't change. All right? Okay, let me see if there's anything else I had on chapter 11. Nope, we're good now to go to 12. Okay?
Just going back to what was discussed about the Shabbat conversation-wise, just a quick question. When you have children that are not in covenant at the table, I know you've mentioned what not to talk about, but what do you talk about? Because obviously everyone's talking about their week, and then we're not supposed to talk too much about it. So it's sort of like, well, how do you form the conversation?
Look, I think that, we don't need to get into this level where we become like almost paranoid about it. But if you're just eating your meals together, your family, not everybody's in covenant. Okay, you can allow for a certain amount of conversation just during the meal. Not that you're going to sit there for 3 hours, but you're going to spend 30 minutes or an hour eating a meal. This is going to be okay. You want the children to feel like it's family time. You want the children who are not covenanted, they're not getting it, to see the blessing of the relational stuff. And by the way, there is some relational stuff in just listening. Okay, and they might need some of that, especially if you don't maybe give them a lot of attention during the week. So I would not be against that being okay in your house. Now, of course, there's the difference between things being Torah and things being your house. In your house, you can have any rules you want that they have to listen to just because it's your house. I'm your mother. We're not going to do this right now. Okay? But then you said the other part of it, which is the challenge, well, then what do we talk about? And they're not going to want to talk about this stuff, so I understand that. So I would allow for a certain amount of conversation that's, again, you're building that relationship. As a parent, you want to hear what they're going through in their life. But you can minimize it. They don't need to be talking amongst themselves just about the latest sports game or movie or book or whatever, and say, look, we're not going to have that at the table. Look, a lot of you have a rule, no electronics at the table. Same kind of thing, right? So you can have a rule, we don't talk about this on Shabbat at the table. Now, you can tell me about your day or about your week or some things that are going on in your life. That's fine. But we're not going to talk about the latest sporting event or song or album that came out or some movie or book. Okay, we're going to try to keep it relational. Okay, does that help?
Yep.
Okay.
So in chapter 12, what jumped out at me was verse 21 towards the end. It talks about an offering, and you shall eat within your gates as much as your being desires. And before that, it was talking about not forsaking the Levite, as in your land, when Yahweh your Elohim enlarges your border as he has promised you. And you say, let me eat meat because you long to eat meat. And it just goes on. And then later on, it talks about, and you, hang on, where is it?
Okay, so hold on. Verse 21 is basically saying, look, There's a difference between slaughtering animals to eat as food and all of the instruction he said where you are not allowed to just bring offerings anywhere. Okay? So we have a bunch of those verses in here too where it says you do not just get to go and offer just anywhere you want. But that doesn't mean that you can't slaughter animals for food. Because in the previous verse it talks about when Yahweh your Elohim enlarges your border and he's promised you and you say, well, I'm hungry, I want to eat meat. Because you long to eat meat, you eat meat as much as your heart being desires. So when the place is too far to go, and you want to celebrate and eat meat, you can eat meat. This is not meat that's now being offered on some sort of altar in your backyard. Okay?
Okay.
Okay.
So, sort of not related to that, but sort of related to that. My question is, I just feel at home, you know, you give your tithes, you go to work, and there's nothing special about it. And so I'm just wondering whether the sacrifices, like the peace offerings, the votive offerings, that they all meant something. And like, I know the tithes are different for different times of year, but it's like they had a different way of expressing their love for God, and I just wanted to get some meaning into what I'm doing.
All right, very good. Okay, first I just found the verses I wanted to talk to you about that were related. It says, as far as the offerings, we see that this is in verse 13 as well as in verse 17, where it says that guard yourselves, you do not offer your burnt offerings in every place that you see. And he also says you're not allowed to do these things in your own gates. You don't make these offerings in your own property. Now, to answer your question about the tithing, look, I agree 100% with what she just said. Tithing can become very mechanical. You miss a lot of the emotional connectivity as well as the idea of that you're doing this and the purpose of it, because you're just simply hitting a donation button, setting up something automated, even if you know what your paycheck's like, or you're just writing a check on a regular basis, or even having your bank do it and that kind of thing. They didn't do it that way. When they did the offerings, they went to the temple. They went and gave it to the priest. They declared that they didn't mess with it. That was a big declaration to say, I have not done anything I shouldn't do with this stuff. And we're going to read those verses, okay, where they made those kind of declarations. And so if it makes you feel, if it meets that need that you were saying, it's totally appropriate for you to bring the tithe and come to me and say, I'm bringing the tithe. Because then you'll feel like I'm giving it and I'm bringing it to the priest, so to speak, and I'm going through that exact thing. And I know some people do that. I know there are people that come to me specifically to give me the tithe. They don't want to put it right in the box. They don't want to just do it automated through the mail. They want to come and hand it. And there's something about that bringing some meaning there. But that was through the ritual of doing that. But I'm so against the idea of obligated pressuring, like where they pass around an offering box and the whole thing, or, the pushki goes around or whatever. It's supposed to be something that you're motivated to do. So we're looking to find a balance with that. In the culture of Yah with Israel, they went to the temple with these things, and they brought them before the priest, and they confessed, or at least in a way confessed, meaning they made a declaration that they have not done anything inappropriate with the funds, with the grain, the animals, whatever it is they were bringing. Okay? In this case, of course, it also tells you if a place is too far, we're going to get to chapter 14, you can convert that into money, into silver and gold. Okay? You can come and follow up. Okay, let her have the mic just for a second. She has a follow-up question. Okay, did that help at all?
Yeah,
okay,
absolutely.
Good. All
right. So with regards to the sacrifices, even though they don't apply now, is there something of meaning in the peace offerings or the votive offerings that we can put into our lives now that means something?
Well, I wouldn't say that way, but I could maybe help you with the other part of the question. I think it's probably helpful for all of you to have a tzedakah box at your house. Tzedakah is charity. The offering box actually has in Hebrew written on it, tzedakah. Maybe that was the older box. Anyway, but tzedakah, in a Jewish house, everybody has a tzedakah box. The family does, each individual kid has. And what they'll do is they're not only going to put, like, say, their tithe in there, etc., which is where you can even have a moment between you and Yah and say, I'm putting this tithe in this box. Instead of just off writing a check and putting it in the mail, but you're putting it into something that you're going to keep it there for the week or for a month or whatever it is. Because some people tithe annually. We've got people that come here with their whole year's tithe. We've got people that will send it every paycheck. Different people do it different ways. But you can find a way that brings more meaning to you. But they also, in the Jewish community, they don't generally pray for themselves. In other words, asking something without going and putting something in the box first. It's not because they're trying to pay off or buy off their creator. It's about the idea that I shouldn't be asking for anything if I'm not giving to something. Why should I? What was that? Well, don't be empty-handed is more about the feast. But it's the idea of, because the empty hand, that's an appreciation thing. Okay, but a lot of times when they go to pray and ask for something, they always put first to say, I'm willing to give to help others, because it's a charity box, essentially, the third tithe type of thing, or an offering for supporting whatever the ministry is doing. It's I want to give to you before I ask from you. Okay? I'm not buying you off. I'm donating. I'm making an offering. Same thing what you're saying about other ways that we look at these other offerings. You can look at it that way. We don't have animals to do and vegetables to do, etc., crops and things. But you can take some of your funds, put it in the box and saying, this is an offering to you before I come before you to ask for my need. And so that may be something that you can do. This is something that is done very, very consistently in the Jewish community. Okay? That's all right.
So what was the peace offering for? Like, what was it?
Okay, so right now my brain is completely wrapped into Deuteronomy and not Leviticus. So, I don't have that.
Oh, okay.
In the front.
Yeah, because I know there's vows, and I just don't know what they were all for. And obviously they were something of a gift to God anyway. So, yeah.
Yeah, and we covered that in the cycle when we get to Leviticus. The first Torah portion in Leviticus covers the 5 offerings, okay? And so we have them covered in tremendous detail, okay? Okay. But right now I've got my brain completely focused on Deuteronomy stuff, so I apologize. Okay, James.
Morning, Rabbi.
Good morning.
I'm starting on the same verse, but slightly different question. When it talked about wasn't even thinking about the slaughtering, but the fact that as Yahweh expands their land as promised, and the place he places his name is too far away from you, then you can basically perform your feast at home, is what it sounds like.
Well, remember, we're talking about not necessarily the 3 pilgrimage feasts. Okay, they're still expected to journey for those. But remember, there's other feasts, okay, because you still have the other days that they get observed and other things. So, and also remember that they were required to do it. Now, he says that there are going to be places in each tribe. As the tribe grows and expands, you're not all going to be able to make the trip all the way to Jerusalem, but there'll be a place in each tribe to do certain things. But certain things you needed to go to Jerusalem for. Okay?
Okay. Next verse. Can you just elaborate on it's kind of we eat like a gazelle, which is kind of saying, okay, you're a vegetarian now, but then you can say you can eat all the animals that are clean and unclean right after that?
Strange. Nobody asked this question. Now, that one's one of the circled ones that we cover every time we get to chapter 12. And actually, he says it twice. It's in verse 15 and in verse 22. Okay? So we have that kind of covered. By the way, let's look at chapter 14 just for a second. Because in chapter 14, and in verse 5, it says, actually in verse 4 it says, these are the living creatures which you do eat. And in verse 5 it says, deer and gazelle. So deer and gazelle are clean. Okay. Now let's go back to chapter 12. So in verse 15, at the end of the verse, it says, the unclean and the clean do eat of it, of the deer and the gazelle alike. And in verse 22, it says the same thing, only as the gazelle and the deer are eaten, so you are to eat of it, the unclean and the clean alike. Okay, so he picked 2 clean animals because he's wanting you to understand he's not talking about the animals, he's talking about the people eating the animals. Okay? Because you, as a person involved in the rituals of the holy days, the rituals of the temple, needed to be aware at all times of your status, which was called tameh or tahor. You were either clean or unclean. Okay, I said it backwards English from the Hebrew. Tameh is unclean, tahor is clean. Okay, so you were unclean or clean. Tameh or tahor. And what he's telling you is that these things, in this case, everybody can participate. Just like both the deer and the gazelle are both clean, we're going to consider the person, whether you were actually tameh or tahor, you're clean enough to do this. To do certain things, you couldn't do it if you were tameh. All right? You can't do the Passover if you're tameh. You got to wait till the next month, and hopefully you'll be clean for that. All right? This is why in the book of John it says that the Jews would not go into Pilate's place where he was because they didn't want to become tameh, coming into contact with something that would make them unclean, because they hadn't yet kept the Passover. Which also proves that the Last Supper wasn't the Passover. Okay, because this is happening after the supper. And it says they hadn't yet kept the Passover, and they didn't need to, they wanted to make sure nobody wants to wait an extra month. Okay? Everybody's doing it now. Let's do it all together. You don't want to be the few that end up running into something that makes you wait a month for the second Passover. So they were concerned not to do anything or accidentally come into contact with something, so they weren't going to go into Pilate's house. Make sense? Okay? So, yes, this is a verse that, unfortunately, the unlearned and unstable twist to their own destruction, as Peter would tell us. Because people don't think about the idea that they could be talking about unclean people. Because Christianity doesn't teach you about that status. There's only one status they worry about, saved. And that's not even a status. In their head it is, but scripturally there's no status called saved. But there is a status called unclean and one called clean. And that status is what's being talked about here. Okay, so James, that answer your question? Okay, because we're talking about the people. And so here, and especially if you've been through Leviticus, you know that there's a lot of places where it says that only these people in this condition can participate in this, or they can eat. Because when you brought your stuff to the temple, some things you would eat with the Levites, some things was just for them. Okay, after it was offered, after it was burnt and all the whatever, you could then participate and eat some of that with them, depending on what kind of offering it was, depending on what else was going on, right? Okay? So he's telling you, in this case, where we're dealing with it, the feasts here, he says, this is something that when you do it, you can participate whether you are unclean or clean. Your status doesn't matter. Okay, great. Continuing chapter 12.
I would like to know the practical condition of chapter 12, verse 23. Not to eat blood, for the blood is the life. Do not eat the life with the meat.
Okay.
Okay. When we go to restaurant, we order steak, and then they will ask us a raw, medium done, or a well done, something like that. Is it applied to this verse?
No. No. Okay, so look, you have to understand, again, we have a disconnect by thousands of years. Cultural disconnects. There was and still is in some of the more out in the, the middle of nowhere type places, like out in the jungles areas where there's, people are not in a civilized place and they're basically just literally hunting down their food and they're growing, very, very much more of that primitive sort of setup where they still will kill an animal and right after the kill, they will have the blood and the meat and all that stuff. Because there was this thought that the life and the power of the animal was in the blood. So we're talking about that you're doing this at the same time as the slaughter. All companies still today drain out the blood from the animals. Not because of kosher, it weighs more, it's not doing any good. They're going to drain out the blood. Now you'll see a lot of red stuff. This is not the blood anymore. This is the plasma or whatever. I don't know what it's called, but this is other things included, not just the blood. The what? The myoglobin, okay? So, I mean, I don't know enough about, but I've been told by the people who know these things from biology that it's not the blood anymore that we're dealing with. Because look, I've gone and gotten some stuff from the kosher busher. That was the bloodiest looking stuff I've ever found. I mean, that stuff is just red everywhere. But it's very liquidy, it's very thin, and it's not the blood, okay? So when you go to the restaurant or you're cooking for yourself, you can eat it rare, medium rare, whatever you want. That's not the problem, okay? And you don't have to like salt it to death to try to get every drop of liquid out of it. Okay? Because a lot of people will do that as well. That's not the problem. I like a little.
Yes, just,
Okay.
but from the point of view of nutrition and food study, that just beware of the bacteria in the raw.
Well, yeah, that's why a lot of the restaurants will not give you something that's, undercooked. They say, well, you can't go to rare. We have to go to medium rare.
Yeah.
Because they're worried about things like salmonella and other stuff that can be in the meats. Okay?
Yeah.
Thank you. That's a good question because a lot of people, they get appropriately, it's funny, people get obsessed about some Torah and very slack on others, and it's always funny to me which ones they obsess on. So they'll decide, this is what I'm going to obsess on. Meanwhile, they're like shopping on Shabbat. I mean, but they're like freaked out about whether there's blood in the meat. Okay? Okay, none of the meat you buy in any of the stores is a problem as far as blood in the meat. Okay, none of the manufacturers are giving you that because they're talking about fresh kill living blood. Life is in the blood. You're talking about that type of thing. Okay, you're not getting fresh kill. Now, if you're a hunter, you know what fresh kill is all about. So that meat needs to be drained. Okay, all right, who's next? Okay,
Good day. Good day, Rabbi.
Good day, mate.
Just piggybacking off of what my mum's question on eating with the uncovenant on Shabbat, I'm asking on behalf of someone else. What if you're at a table with uncovenanted people only, just you, on Shabbat, and the topic isn't kosher? What should you do? Should you be avoiding a scenario like that? Should you dismiss yourself and somehow not get people offended or something?
No, look, if you find yourself, staying with family or friends or something and nobody in the group is covenanted because you're traveling or whatever that is, and you find that on Shabbat there are challenges, I would spend most of my Shabbat at services somewhere. I would avoid all of that, okay? And if you don't have some place to go, find some place to go where you can go watch live stream. They don't have to know that you don't have some place to go. Just find some place to go. Okay? Go find a lobby of a hotel where they've got Wi-Fi. Go do something where you can do this. But that way you avoid this to a certain degree. But if you're trapped in it, just don't participate very much. I mean, let them do what they're doing because they're doing what they're doing. It's not your issue. Okay, you're there. You're a guest. You're kind of stuck in that place. You can't control what's going on around you. But you can control what you do. But there's no need to be like, oh no, they're doing that. I got to run. No, you don't have to do that and embarrass them because there are other scriptural verses that require you to have an appropriate, effort to not offend. Okay? So don't participate in the conversation, if it's going in the wrong direction. You can sit there. A lot of people, I can tell you, I've sat with a lot of people who don't say a word through meals, who don't say a word almost ever. They're the ones with the white lanyards, and they're very quiet. Okay? And they don't say a whole lot, and somehow they get through it. They manage to sit in groups and other people talk, and they don't have to say a whole lot. And so you certainly can do that. That's going to be really challenging for some of you blues and yellows, but hey, it's a good practice and an effort, all right, to do that. Because some of you will find me, as much as I talk, you'll find me incredibly quiet in a social gathering. And wonder, wow, Rabbi's being really quiet. I don't know how to do social stuff. But you'll see me in other gatherings very, very talkative. That's because people are asking me stuff that I can do my rabbi thing, so to speak, okay? And they'll be like, we think you're so social. We'll go to like a restaurant and you're talking. Yeah, but people are asking me questions. And we're having discussions that are about the kind of stuff. Then I'm doing red things, so to speak, okay? All right, but if we're just in a social group, I'll be as quiet as anything. Because I don't have anything to say in those kind of things. I don't know how to do that stuff. So you can do the same thing, okay? But definitely if you're going to be traveling, You know, when I go to my parents' house to visit, if it's going to be over Shabbat, which is very rare, I try to make sure you don't have to do that. But if it is, we make sure we have some place to go. Okay? And that way we don't have to sit there and deal with that. Actually, at this point, my parents let us just take over the living room and play the live stream, and it's fine. All right? But, you know, see what you can do, especially if you're the only one and they're not going to bend themselves to you. All right? Anything else?
Yeah, one more question on the subject of kashrut. It's probably a stupid question, but it still needs to get asked, I guess. Deuteronomy 14:11. Would we be able to ask that question now, or it would probably be a really quick one?
Go ahead.
Among the birds listed in the kashrut, is it implied that kind of bird is unclean? For example, it states 3 types of owl are unclean, but it doesn't name like a barn owl. Does that make the barn owl clean?
No, I mean, look, again, we're looking at a lot of times the species that they were running into more than some other part of the world, and this is where they were culturally. But you can take, you know, almost all of the unclean animals are the ones that are eating things that are unclean. Now, I know somebody said, yeah, but a chicken will eat anything. I get that. Okay? But these are the ones that generally are going after dead things, and that's their job, actually. Okay? Or owls that are eating rodents and they're doing all these other things like that. So they've got a job, it's just not to be food. Okay? All right, next question.
I want to make sure I do this correctly.
Oh, come on up. There you go.
Testing, is that right? Okay. This is to do with chapter 12, 29 through 32.
Hey, I had that in my notes. Perfect.
Okay. When I was in the military, I went to Korea, and I did a lot of traveling to Buddhist temples, learning the other gods and everything like this. At that time, I considered myself a Christian, but I was very liberal, okay? And Dad said, maybe you shouldn't do that. Maybe
Is that like an oxymoron? I'm a liberal Christian?
Yeah, liberal ideas.
I'm eating pork, I'm keeping whatever days, you know.
Dad said, you know, look at the architecture, but don't partake of the rituals like this. And I got pretty involved. I didn't become a Buddhist. When I got back home, remarried years later, we had our first baby. And I became very conservative. I wanted to make sure what my young daughter saw on TV like this. And we had to categorize things for entertainment. We had to approve what she saw like this. Harry Potter was a big deal.
Were you not online last night for the Torah study? I covered this.
Yeah,
okay.
I know.
Okay, just want to make sure.
Well, I was shocked by what you said because it's a little
bit
more...
So were a lot of people.
It's a little bit more than entertainment because I actually saw a young child, a very young child, actually casting spells that learned from Harry Potter. I actually saw that, and they were actually speaking those things. So it's a little bit more than entertainment. These people are learning about witchcraft. It's Harry Potter, where the whole
wait, hold on. Let me ask you a question. Hold
is
on.
a school of witchcraft.
Hold on. Let me ask you a question. What was the child doing?
He was casting spells.
So the child was actually saying words expecting something to happen? Or he was just repeating what was in the movie?
Repeating what was in the movie.
Like we do with Dora the Explorer or any other, the Bubble Guppies or...
Right.
See, the kid wasn't casting any spells. The kid's just doing what's in the movie.
But he's learning from a school of witchcraft. That's a little bit more than just entertainment. That's why I beg the difference with you on that. I think it's very important, very serious about that. You know, other things like that. Football games, I can understand.
Okay, hold on. Are you going to prevent your child from seeing this stuff?
Yes.
Really?
Yeah.
Up to what point are you going to be? Are the children never going to visit other children?
I don't.
Are the children are they never going to watch anything at anybody else's house? Are they never going to get access to a cell phone or a tablet? You can't control this from the point of view of stopping them. What you can is control how they understand it. Did everybody hear that? Because I know some very strict parents, and I laugh and said, "You're kidding yourselves." Whatever you can prevent them from seeing at home, they will absolutely rush to go see somewhere else. My brother tried really hard to keep his daughters away from Barbies or Disney or whatever. He wouldn't do any Disney stuff. Well, guess what? Eventually she got it because he couldn't stop her from running into it. So now he needed to repackage it for himself, what he wanted her to understand about it. So you can have your children understand about these things.
Right.
They will find it,
Well,
and worse.
I have to do my part. If she happens to see it somewhere else, and we control that too. She stayed in the
Well,
synagogue.
what did I say last night? I didn't tell you to let everybody do everything. I said you have authority in your house to do what you want,
Right.
and you prevent whatever you want. Didn't I say that?
Yeah.
I just said that you need to understand the reality. In reality, they're going to be exposed to it. You cannot shelter your children. Actually, the more sheltered they are, the more they're going to get screwed up if you don't explain to them what the world is really like. Because they're going to be in it at some point. This is why you have the backlash. Anybody know what a PK is? And did that ever go well? Generally, PK, preacher's kid? All right? Because the preacher's kid is the one that's got all that harsh restriction on them, and they're the ones that run out and seek all the craziness. But if you can be able to expose them in a right way to things so they know the right way to package, receive, understand things, now you're helping them to be prepared for what they're going to be exposed to. But that's your choice, your children. You do what you want. And you can disagree with me, and that's totally fine. But I want you to understand, in the reality of the world, your children are going to be exposed to this, and what you need to be doing is not just restricting them, but helping them understand what it is and why. Otherwise, they're going to want to know. First of all, they don't believe a word you say. Do you understand that, parents? There's a big part of them that doesn't believe a word you say. As they get older, they're going to want to know for themselves, do I agree with what my parents said? Now they're going to be even more curious if you didn't expose them to it. All right? And so I'm just saying, be careful with this. This could blow up in your face while you're trying to keep it from blowing up in your face. Just my opinion. And I know that you're really concerned, and you should be. There is some really awful stuff out there that your children will get exposed to. And you will have almost no control over that. You will only be able to possibly control it in your house. And even that, trust me, once they get access to a digital media, they will find everything that you tried to stop them from, no matter what you think you're doing to stop them. So you better do it, in my opinion, in a way where you have some control over it so you can package it for them. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I agree with your concern, though.
Yeah.
I'm equally concerned, trust me. I've got a teenager who's almost 16 and another teenager that's almost 15. I'm right in the middle of all that. Okay? But I also recognize that I can control their interaction with it and understanding if I can be there when they first get initially exposed to some of these things so I can make sure they understand it right. Because they're going to find it. We all understand that. Okay. Okay, next.
It's on 14.
It's on 14? We can go to 14 now. Actually, wait, hold on. Let me do... okay, so out of those verses that he went to, I want to emphasize something he didn't say, but he kind of hinted at, which is when he was going to some of those countries and they had the Buddhist things, they had all this other stuff, the main thing is that you do not do as they do to worship their Elohim or their mighty ones. You don't do what they do to worship our Elohim. Okay? That's out of a teaching called do not do as they do. All right? So that's a big part of verses 29 to 32. Chapter 13, we get into the beware false prophets teaching, and so I'm not going to share that here. But just remember that the whole point is, first of all, the person mentioned in their translation, they're reading the word Navi. Okay, Navi or Nevi'im, that's the word for prophet in Hebrew, okay, just so you know. Because the translation, I like that the translation of having it say Navi, because it says, when there arises among you a Navi or a dreamer of dreams, okay, a prophet, okay, the Navi or the Nevi'im, the plural, are the prophets. Okay, so in chapter 13 and in verses 1 through 11, that's the whole beware false prophets thing. In verse 2, though, it's talking about mighty ones which you have not known. Now, bear in mind, it's not saying ones that you didn't hear of. Again, this is relational, okay? Just make sure we've made that point. These people had heard of Dagon and Chemosh and all of that, okay? What he's saying is they don't have a relationship with them, okay? You just heard him mention Buddhism. You guys have heard of Buddhism. You've heard of Hinduism. You've heard of Taoism. You've heard of, Islam. You've heard of a lot of stuff, but you don't have a relationship with it. Okay, he's saying don't have a relationship with these things. So he says if they're trying to lead you towards a relationship with something else, that's what you need to be worried about. Okay? Okay, that's the whole point of the Beware False Prophets and looking at Christianity. What is Christianity doing? Is it leading you towards Yahweh and Torah and Yeshua in that context, or is it leading you away from that? It's completely leading you away from that. That's why the system is a problem. Not the people in it, but the system, okay? And it says it again in verse 6. It talks about, again, when your brother or some family member or friend that's close to you, etc., is trying to get you to go and seek after other mighty ones that you have not had a relationship with. So let's just be careful with that. By the way, that's also, because we just mentioned Christianity, any flavor of Yahweh, Yeshua, whatever, that leads you away from the correct, as far as Torah observance. So that includes that whole Melchizedekian craziness out there. Oh, some of the law was done away with. No, none of the law was done away with. But that's leading you into a wrong relationship, because remember, we're talking about even mighty ones, like people came up to Yeshua and said, Lord, Lord, and he goes, no, you didn't have a relationship with me. You thought you did, though. So it's not just saying things that are openly obvious, like, Dagon and Chemosh and all that stuff. Okay, it's talking about, or Molech. It's talking about even the subtleties of representing Yeshua and the Father in ways that's not them, where it leads you away from doing what they have asked you to do. If you love me, guard my commandments. All of Deuteronomy, keep the commandments. Do not add or take away. We didn't cover that, but that was mentioned once or twice in these chapters that we've read already in the first 14 chapters. So let's make sure that we're aware of that. And then in, let's see, I got one more, and then we'll go to 14. Oh, you got one? Okay.
This is from Alana. This is Deuteronomy 12:11. If they build the new temple in our lifetime, will we be obligated to offer and sacrifices? And will this place be where Abba says? Just trying to apply it for today.
Okay. Really, really good question. And probably, I shouldn't say probably, there's a possibility in your lifetime it may come up as an issue. It's going to come up as somebody's lifetime as an issue. Okay, because there's going to be a rebuilding, or at least an attempt to rebuild a temple. They'll at least get the altar going, because that's prophetic, that there will be an altar that is going, and it's at the time that Yeshua returns. Okay, so what do you do then? I am hoping that whoever is the anointed appointed that have the appropriate roles at that time, that they will know what to do, and they will be able to tell you what to do. It may even be the two witnesses are the people that are there to say, we do or we don't do. I don't know at this point what to tell you, except that I'm prayerful and hopeful that I will know what we should do when we get there. Okay, is that fair? Okay, but I think that there is a possibility that could happen in some of the people that are around here in our lifetime. Who knows? It could be that it doesn't happen for a long time, but there's always that possibility, so it's a good question. It's a question, though, that I don't think we can answer yet. It's going to really depend on how it comes about, who builds it, and what the context is, and how it comes about, all right? So let's just see what happens when it happens, and I think that we'll have some more clarity. All right, good question. Is there another one?
This one's 14:1.
Okay, let me just finish. I had one more. I may have one more. Okay, in verse 17 of chapter 13, and none of that which is put under the ban is to cling to your hand. When Yahweh says to let go of something, let go. Don't hold on to it. Oh, but you have no idea about me and shrimp. I don't care. I don't care about you and bacon. I don't care about you. Figure it out. Don't let anything cling to your hand. Look, I had a guy who was kind of like a similar role to like a Kurt Meyer, okay, like a Shamish, back in years and years ago. And I found out that he got free tickets to the Vols game, big, Tennessee Vols fan. And so he went. It was on Saturday, of course. Next week, I said to him teasingly, "How was the game?" He didn't know I knew. Within a few weeks, he stopped coming because he was clinging to something. It was too tempting to get free tickets on Saturday to the football game. It's a highly coveted ticket. They're not easy to get. The alums all buy them up, and you can't really get these things. College football is an obsession. It's a religion for the people that are, not just everybody watches at home, but some of them at home too. But I mean, the people that go and everything, when your team is your team, oh my gosh. You've not seen anything like it until you've seen it, right? See, I grew up in New York. Nobody really cared about college football. We didn't have any there that was worth any note. Okay, but you come to the South, oh boy. People worship at the gridiron. And so he went. Why? The temptation was too great. There was still a clinging on to that, something that still stuck to his hand, this heart for that opportunity. Is there something going on that you could be tempted to break Torah because of it? If somebody were to offer it to you, can you be bought with a price? You've already been bought with a price. Is there a price that could take you into a wrong direction? Is there? So let's be careful that we don't cling to what Yah has put under the ban. That's important. Some of you still have some of your Christmas stuff in the attic somewhere. Get rid of it. What are you holding on to it for? Well, I haven't decided yet whether I'm going to sell it or not. Why would you sell it? It tells you at the end of one of the chapters that none of that stuff is supposed to put any funds in your pocket. You shouldn't covet its gold and silver. It's the end of chapter 7, I think, right? Yeah, 7:25. Why are you holding on to that stuff? Get rid of it. All right. Now we can go to chapter 14. You got one more for 13? All right, good. Javier?
One more going back to what the gentleman was talking about with other cultures. So I enjoy things from things like Chinese and Japanese culture, and there have been times I've actually gone to like Chinese New Year parades because I thought it was really cool. So I'd like to go. In that aspect, is enjoying other cultures the same as being exposed to it in a way where you're thinking that you may be participating in something?
Well, it depends on what the cultural thing is. I mean, if the cultural thing is going to have religious aspects to it, I wouldn't be involved with it. Let me give you an example. My wife and I, for our anniversary a few years ago, she saw an advertisement for this thing called Shen Yun. Anybody ever heard those advertisements? 5,000 years of Chinese culture. And it shows them doing dancing and doing all kinds of other cultural things. That's not what it is. It is almost 2 hours of Buddhist propaganda. The first hour before the intermission is fairly benign, so you don't know this. We got so mad after we got through almost the second hour. We asked for our money back, and we got very upset with the people for misleading us. Okay? Because there's a segment of Buddhism that is being absolutely oppressed and tortured and whatever. So this is like their cultural propaganda to bring attention to the oppression that they're having in China. So I get that motivation. I just wish they would have been more upfront about it so I wouldn't have gone. Okay? Because that's what it turned into, an entirely benign thing with dancing and singing to turn into a totally Buddhist promotional for the last hour. And we about walked out, and we would have if it hadn't just subtly sort of snuck in on us, because it was not promoted that way. You see the ads for it, it looks like, you're going to see culture, and you're going to see, things with dancing and, whatever other banners and whatever else, acrobatics and all that. I said, that would be entertaining, like going to the circus or going to some culture. It's great. Oh, no. So if you know something is that, I wouldn't go. I would never go to that again. Yeah. I wouldn't have gone in the first place if I knew. So you know what I'm talking about. Okay? Wait a minute, hold on. Let her, this is just about that particular thing. But stay there, Javier. Okay.
Yes, exactly. Even this place, someone is now traveling all over different places. We aware of it. It's called Shanwan. You see the advertisement with Chinese ancient costume, dancing. Beware of it.
Yes, okay. And it is a travel thing. It'll pop up on your YouTube now as an ad. It's a very popular thing running around the country, played in Chattanooga. What I'm just saying is, if you're aware of it, though, like you're going to like a Chinese New Year, they're going to be doing a lot of stuff with the year of whatever animal it is, and they're going to be doing this other stuff and everything else, and I don't think I would participate in that. Okay? I'm not going to Times Square either on January, 1st or December. I mean, I'm not, and I lived in New York and never went. Okay? Because I'm not going to freeze to death just trying to stand around and watch a ball drop. But that was when I was in the world. But I mean, I still wouldn't do it now. Okay? I'm not going to get involved in all those rituals. Now, as far as enjoying culture, I'll go to historical sites, learning about culture, understanding what they did and where they're going from, but I'm not going to participate in something that is a religiously based event. Okay?
So if I know that it's somewhat religiously based, or it might be based on some sort of pagan ritual that they've done before, then don't participate.
No. And if you happen to have it happening once you're there, you can always choose to get up and leave.
Yeah. But if I don't know, because I'm still fairly, ignorant with some of the things, I just go, wow, that's really cool. What's that? I'd like to, maybe go take a look at that or see that, or maybe even, because I've been to a Shenyun thing, and as you said, there is a lot of other things in there that I was just like, why? I thought this was just going to be a really cool artsy dance thing. And
the whole second half was a promotional thing for and it ends up finishing with like Buddha showing up on the stage. I'm not making that up. Okay? I mean, the whole thing is a giant Buddha on the stage at the end of it. It was awful. It was just, and again, not so awful because, I mean, it's their belief system and everything. I was just awful because it was a deception. I didn't appreciate being kind of suckered into it.
So besides things that might be blatantly obvious, more or less just kind of be careful when we're seeing things that might be from another culture, and we might think, let's enjoy that because I think that's cool or that looks nice. Just sort of tread carefully with those things, correct?
Amen. I think there is a value in you understanding what other people do. There's an awareness so that you understand to have the context to put things in when you see things that other people do. But there's also a difference between that and participating in it. Okay? And he's telling us not to participate in this stuff. Being aware of it is probably useful because if you're in an awareness, you can be now educated enough to know what it is you're seeing. All right? But on the other hand, there again, don't participate in it. Okay? Go ahead. What?
Just to piggyback off of what the gentleman just said, what about...
I don't know, is that kosher to piggyback? I don't know. Well, I guess we're not eating it, so it's okay.
Touche.
Okay.
Don't touch its dead carcass. Right.
No.
What about exercises such as yoga?
Yep, I was
things
going to
like
bring that
are
up.
related to religious culture?
Yeah, again, yoga is generally done with a lot of that involved in it. So, as opposed to just learning to protect yourself in martial arts, where most of the martial arts doesn't get that way, yoga does tend to go that way. A lot of the ones that are done here in the States have lost a lot of that part of it, okay? But you know what? There's a lot of really good stretching programs out there that are not yoga. Because if you're doing it for stretching, there's lots of other systems out there of stretching that you can do, okay? So it doesn't have to be yoga. Okay, next.
All right, 1421. It seems to me that it's okay for us to give unclean meat to uncovenant people. Is that what it's saying?
Yeah, it says, do not eat whatever dies of itself. Give it to the strangers within your gates to eat it or sell it to the foreigner. So, yeah, you can do that. Don't eat it. Did you want to say something, Raymond? Yeah. It's discussing what? Defiled. Okay. All right. Okay. Again, that's actually, thank you for clarifying that. As you're going through this, it's saying, do not eat whatever dies of itself, give it to the stranger. It's not talking about something that's tameh, it's just talking about something that's defiled because it died of itself. Thank you. Appreciate that. When you're handling 57 questions, sometimes it's hard to keep up on everything. Did you catch that, everyone? Sometimes we miss the timing and the framework. It says, look, any clean bird you do eat, and it's going through all of the clean and unclean, but it says, look, if something dies of itself, though, you can't eat it. It doesn't matter if it was clean as an animal that was for food, but if it dies of itself, you can't eat it. But that animal you can sell or give to the stranger. Okay? Thank you for that. Appreciate it.
I just want to add something. If you go to purchase something, it looks ancient or Chinese stuff, beware what you purchase. Sometimes it has a Buddhist connotation behind.
Just always ask what the origin of something is, so you know what it is. I know people that have had wonderful things in their house that look so cool. They got it in an antique shop only to find out it was some tribal fertility thing. But it didn't say that on the thing when they bought it. It wasn't like a label saying, because a lot of stuff is labeled because they know what it is. A lot of stores have stuff they don't even know what it is, so they just put it out there. People think it's pretty and they buy it anyway, All right? So you should, know what you're buying. Thank you.
When you buy it, they would convince you this bring you prosperity, a blessing, all kinds of things. No.
Well, any of those things you should know already. If that's all, those things should be obvious. Okay, thank you, Santi. Okay, chapter 14. We're running out of time. It's 11:45.
I'm asking this for a friend.
Yep.
So,
is that kind of like the psychology thing? I'm here to talk about a friend. No. No, I know you're asking this for a friend. Go ahead.
Okay, so in 4:14, where it talks about how the raven is unclean, the question is, so then how could Yahweh have used the raven to bring food to the prophet while he was on the mountain when he was in hiding?
All right. Okay. We have to really take I don't even know the word. We get zoomed in wrong ways, okay? These things are not food. They're not evil. They're not without purpose. They're just not to be eaten, okay? Our water systems benefit very much from the shellfish, the catfish. They have a job to do. They're just not for you to eat, okay? Does that make sense? Okay, so ravens have a purpose. By the way, so do owls, so do eagles, and all these other things that you can't eat. They have a purpose. They're just not food. So let's not get confused about just because it's not food that it has no purpose or can't be used in any way. Okay, who's next? Okay, live stream.
Okay, Michelle Perez, question 14:1. What is meant by it?
14:1. You are the children of Yahweh, your Elohim. Do not cut yourselves nor shave the front of your head for the dead. There were lots of rituals that were done then that are not done now as much that had to do with things that they did in trying to honor the dead. Okay, they got tattoos for the dead. They made carvings in their skin for the dead. They shaved their heads in certain ways for the dead. And he's saying, look, don't imitate these rituals. Okay? So hopefully for the live stream person that answered the question. Okay. And I'm going to need to cut everybody off in a second or two if you don't ask the questions that I need in 14, so I got to cover some things. Go ahead. You got to push that button. If the light's on, it means it's off. There you go. There you go.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Because of the fact that we're in the diaspora, should that have any effect on our modern walk in any way? As far as, tithing, offerings, whatever?
Well, in the diaspora, we obviously don't have a temple to deal with. And actually, even in the land, they don't have a temple to deal with. And so, some of that's actually going to be covered here in chapter 14. So I'll try to address some of that here in a second, okay? Okay, but good question. Anybody else before I kind of wrap up the few things that I want to cover here in the chapter? No? Okay, we're good? All right, hold on to the mic for a second and then, okay. So what we have in Deuteronomy 14 is actually, some of that actually deals with this to a certain degree because it talks about when the place that Yahweh's name dwells is too far for you to just go to, with all your stuff, and it may be actually too far to go to because it's just too far. I mean, back then they didn't have as big a problem with that because they weren't driving cars or flying in planes, generally to long distance places. And so he said that you can take the tithe that you have and you can turn that into, exchangeable money, silver, gold, etc. And so this is important. Now let's understand that first. It starts in verse 22, says, you shall tithe without fail. All the yield of your grain that the field brings forth year by year, etc. And now again, people say, well, he only mentions grain there. Please, okay? Again, we like to zoom in too much and miss the whole point. You're going to tithe without fail. All right? And he says, and you shall eat before Yahweh your Elohim in the place where he chooses to place his name, the tithe of your grain. Now he mentions the new wine, your oil, and the first things of earth. He's going to mention all the rest of the stuff in the next verse. Okay, and all of this is done so that you learn to fear Yahweh your Elohim always. So tithing is to teach us to fear him. I know that everybody hates anything. When you hear the word tithing, your skin starts to, But some of you actually get excited about it because you've seen the blessing of it. And so you need to go from that one place to the other because it's core to all of this. There's a lot of people that are watching right now that wanted to be here or not here. You know why you're not here? Some of you, not all of you, because you didn't do this. Because this is going to be talking about the second tithe. Because the first tithe that it talks about in Scripture, you were not allowed to touch. You got to even make a declaration that you didn't touch it. It says this one, though, in verse 24, it says, when the way is too long for you so that you're not able to bring the tithe, in other words, the animals, the grains, and all that stuff, or when the place where Yahweh your Elohim chooses to put his name is too far from you, when Yahweh your Elohim is blessing you, then you shall give it in silver, shall take the silver in your hand and go to the place where Yahweh your Elohim chooses, and you shall use the silver for whatever your being desires, for cattle or sheep or wine or strong drink, for whatever your being desires, and you shall eat there before Yahweh your Elohim. You shall rejoice, you and your household. That is not the same as the tithe that is taught initially. Okay? If it was, it would be really confusing. So when do I eat it? When do I give it? Who do I give it? It's a different one. This is one for feast keeping, so that you would have no excuse saying, I can't afford to go. And not only that, you'd have no excuse to rejoice and enjoy yourself there. Look, I don't care if you make, if you make $10 an hour, that's $20,000 a year, that's $2,000 to spend on those festivals. That's a lot of money for one person. Okay, if you have a family, you probably make a little more than that. So now that's enough to handle the family. It doesn't take a whole lot to have enough tithe to enjoy feasts. It really doesn't. I think one person coming to this place was, $4 something? For the housing and the food and all that? I don't remember what the numbers were, but that's, you have two feasts like that, that's still under $1,000. You should have $2,000 for feasts if you make just $20,000 a year. And most people make $10 an hour or more by the time they're an adult and etc. So I'm not picking if you made $80,000 a year. No, this is very reasonable amounts of money here. Okay? So he's saying, look, you should have this so that you can enjoy yourself. And by the way, for all of you that are coming from an Adventist background or some sort of, anti-alcohol Christian background, he is telling you that, yes, you can have wine and or strong drink, and don't try to tell me that that's just grape juice. Okay? I think I know what yayin is. I'm Jewish. I learned Hebrew. It's wine. Okay? And stop whining about it. But it's wine. Now, the second word there is for intensely intoxicating beverage. Okay? What is it, shakar, I think, or something like that, right? It's like, we're talking about alcohol now. This is strongly, intensely intoxicating. Now, he's not telling you go get rip-roaring drunk. But he's telling you that you can have, because it's a picture of rejoicing, you can have some wine. You can have some alcohol. You can have whatever meat or whatever foods that you want. You can go out and enjoy yourself with. He wants you to live like a king for a week. Because after all, we're practicing and rehearsing for the kingdom. Amen? Okay? So that's really important. So that's your first tithe, is what you give and you can't touch. Your second one here is for feast, because the context of the feast, you go and spend that on whatever your being desires. Okay? And you shall rejoice. Some of you, if I see you not rejoicing, I'm going to get in your face. You need to be rejoicing, whether you like it or not. Okay. Anybody have a parent that ever said that to you? You're going to have fun whether you like it or not. My father really said it to me one time. Okay. And then we have the third tithe, actually mentioned here. There's a tithe that's mentioned in verse 28, When it says at the end of every third year, you bring out all the tithe of your increase in that year and store it up within your gates. And the Levite, because he has no portion of inheritance, and the sojourner, the fatherless, the widow, etc., will come and eat and be satisfied. So this is something you do only in the third year, the sixth year of the 7-year cycle. Okay? That tithe is done twice during the 7-year cycle. And so that's an additional tithe. Okay? It's separate, and this one is for benevolence. This is for the poor. This is to make sure those without have. Now, it does say that you would store it within your gates and they can come to you. I would say that what has happened over the centuries is people realize that that's kind of problematic. First of all, individuals don't need a lot of poor people just showing up at their door, especially because you may or may not be trained to know how to discern who you should be helping and who is just being enabled or entitled. Okay, that's why they had other rules like leaving the corners of your field. A little simpler than just having them knock on your door with their hand out. So over time, people realized that this functioned a lot better if we gave it to the storehouse. And we do have other verses that talk about that and allow the Levite the opportunity to decide how to deal with it. You even have this in the first century where they took all of what they sold and they laid it at the feet of the apostles and said, here, you figure out how to make sure everybody gets what they need. That way it's not left to the individual. You will be taken advantage of. Ministry will be too, but probably a whole lot less often because we're actually more experienced at it, because we deal with this all the time and you don't. Okay? So I'm never going to say, well, we'll never be taken for a ride. We will. Hopefully not often and not hopefully for all that much, but we try to help everybody we can, but we are pretty good about vetting those people. All right? Now, if you see us helping someone and you don't understand why we're helping them, use the key word there, you don't understand. Don't just assume that we're wrong and we don't know what we're doing. Okay, we may be just filling a void that we know we need to do, even though we know we're likely being taken advantage of. But there are moments where we still have to do what we have to do. So as long as you can ask, say, by the way, I have some concerns about this person that you may be helping. And we can tell you we have concerns too, but it's okay, we've got it under control. Okay? Now, so hopefully that makes some sense. So look, when you're looking at the tithing, and there's a teaching that I've done that's called tithing so you can understand it, okay? This is a part of that whole system. And by the way, I need to remind everyone that while you're here, Deuteronomy 16, which we're going to get to next time, does tell us that we are to appear before Yahweh and not appear empty-handed, and that's the 3 times a year that includes Sukkot. So if you've not put anything in the offering box, it's in the back of the room. I'm encouraging you to do something with that sometime during this week, okay? I've been to places where they've done that. They've literally taken up an offering every day and sometimes 2 or 3 times in a day. I said, you guys are just... I was visiting there for a Sukkot. I said, I'm going to put what I'm going to put once, and that's all I'm putting. Because I don't need to be begged 15 times. I know, as I'm blessing him, what I need to do, and I don't need to do that 15 times. Now, you may be inspired further in the week to want to put more in or something like that. That's different. But why would anybody be trying to push you for that? Okay, it's just my job to remind you that's a Torah obligation. Okay. So, with the tithing, this question does come up. I've seen people do all kinds of strange math with this. Let's not do that. Make it simple. 10%, 10%, 10%. That's why it's called a tithe. Okay? It doesn't give you, it's not 10%, 5%, 2.5%, or something like that. Okay? It doesn't keep getting smaller. It's 10%. You mean that I'm going to take 30% on the 3rd and 6th? Yes. And you know what? You can talk to the people here that are doing it, and they've been blessed to abundance. And I've got people saying to me, I was not making it before I started doing these tithes, and now we're making it, and we're not making any different money. And they love the blessing of trying to figure out how that's possible. How can I be making it on less when I couldn't make it on more? That's the whole point. Okay? That's the whole point. You got to try it. There's no other way to know except to try it, okay? Steve wants to give a little testimony. Go ahead.
Okay, before I was tithing to a rabbi,
Come on up here.
I was doing okay, but once I started, my company blew up. And then right before I left, it was a lot of money that I left behind because I also have my own company. But maybe Rabbi don't know, right before I came to the feast, I got an email from a home builder that wants me to do 200 units, which is like 40 weeks worth of work. So now I have more work than I even know what to do with. And
In Cleveland.
Here.
Yeah.
Within 30 days. So everything I left behind has been given here.
Amen. But hold on.
That's because I have my own company. I don't tithe after my gas and I have insurance, liability, all kinds of junk that I have to pay for, but I tithe off the top. If I get a work for instance $3,000, I tithe off the $3,000, and then I pay my expenses. So.
Amen. I appreciate that. Look, I can remember. That's great. See, a lot of you are thinking, I want to figure out all the things I can deduct out of it, and this isn't the government where you try to figure out all your deductions, okay? I mean, there are some legitimate things. If you run a business and you have expenses of the business, as you're tithing on the increase. He's chosen just to tithe on it, period, okay? But I can remember when he first started this, him constantly, like he would just call me up, and like, I can't believe that the business that's coming in all of a sudden. You know, and then he got to his third year, and it was like, he says, I've never had this much work. But he trusted it first. And when he saw the blessing, when he started keeping the first and the second, he had an expectancy when he got to the third. Okay? And then he decided to move to Cleveland from Illinois, and he had a very successful business there, and going to a place where it's a new market for him. I mean, he's a handyman. He comes in, he'll do your kitchen, he'll do your bathroom, he'll do all kinds of remodeling work. And he showed up, and you know what? Now all of a sudden he's got more work than he knows what to do with. This is, but it's also because if then, right? He's been obedient, and so the things then come after that. I've told you with tithing, it's going to expose either a personal issue with greed or with money or tightness of, where a fear issue. You're afraid to deal with the money. You might not have money, etc. But it's also going to expose a finance issue if that's there. Either one of those, if you have them, it will be exposed. Maybe the reason why you're able to live better on third tithe year than you were without any tithing is because you've learned to manage your money finally. You filled all those leaks, and the money's not just leaking out of your, not the kind of leaks in Egypt, different leaks. Okay. But you've plugged up all of those holes in your budget, and you've kind of figured out that you had some of your spending out of control. And so now your finances are in better shape. And so it works better because of that. And so, let's just be aware that that's something that's here in chapter 14. Okay, that's going to close it up. Let me just make sure I didn't miss anything else on here. I think that's it. Awesome. Fabulous job, everyone. And it's almost new. It just hit exactly 12 o'clock, so we hit it right on the nose. I do need someone to close us in prayer. Hands up. All right, give it to Kendall.
Abba, Father, creator of the heavens and the earth, we humbly come before you, thanking you and praising you for allowing us to meet here together as a family to read and study over your word. Father, we thank you for our Nasi and his leadership and guidance in your word, Father. As we go throughout this week, we just pray that you continue to shine your face upon us and bless us as we hope that our actions and thoughts bless you, Father. And we pray all these things in the name above all names, our Messiah Yeshua, we pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen. All right, amen. All right, we'll see you after lunch. We'll have the shofar clinic and the marketplace will be open.